The story begins with the player Shin Sang-yun riding on a dragon, while the system congratulates him for clearing the dungeon, the ancient dragon's nest. Shin grumbles and yells, wondering why he's still working so hard at nearly 60 years old. It's been 30 years since he started living as a swordsman, but his greatest achievement was being among the top 100 in his country. That basically means he's a needle in a haystack. Sang asks if his reward this time is a skill book, and says he's eaten artifacts before. Maybe he can eat this too. Hyun notices a light being emitted, and the system notifies that the constellation Late Model Student has appeared, sincerely congratulating him for his hard work and also praising his flawless final strike. The protagonist thinks that this guy making a dramatic entrance is his contracted constellation, the Late Model Student. He thanks him and thinks he's grateful for contracting a pitiful fifth-rate swordsman like himself. More notifications arrive. Once the player reaches level 850, all artifact and title stats will double. At level 900, they will triple. Shin is currently level 650, but due to those insane conditions, he hasn't benefited from the contract yet. The system notifies that the constellation encourages him to eat the skill book. Sang says he was just about to do that and recalls saying he'd eat the book now. Devouring artifacts is the only ability he received after awakening. To understand his skill, he tried cooking and eating artifacts. He even tried frying them, but didn't feel any difference. By the time he finished his useless experiments, 30 years had passed, and Hyun realized that when he used mana synchronization with a properly ranked artifact, it activated his artifact devouring skill. But he realized it too late. Others got stronger the moment they awakened. The protagonist looks at the book and asks if it's supposed to have instructions or something. The Late Model Student says there's very limited information about this skill and apologizes for not being able to help, but suggests he try again and start mana synchronization once more. Shin questions what he means by plenty of time and says he's nearly 60. If he'd had a kid at 30, that child would be 30 now. If he'd had a kid even earlier, he might have grandchildren by now. The constellation sincerely apologizes if he said something wrong. Sang says it's not his fault, it's just that his life is full of regrets, and he never forgot that man's back. He tried his best to be like him, but now he's just exhausted, too old. If he were just a little younger. The constellation smiles. Hyun says he's going to retire and tells him to start taking notes. An aura is released around the area. The protagonist thinks that the scene he's witnessing now was his last memory at age 55. The Late Model Student used the essence he had experimented with. Regression began. Park Jongmin, the reporter, talks about dungeons and portals and says they're essentially the environments where awakened ones or players work. CEO of the Hwangjeong Corporation, Han Hyun-jung, agrees and says dungeons are the stepping stones for players. As for portals, they're alternate dimensions. In other words, they're connected to unknown regions. These regions are places where players must explore. The protagonist watches the TV and says he really did regress and thinks he understands the situation now, but it's already been 4 days. More precisely, he returned 30 years to the past. After what happened, he lost consciousness, and when he woke up, he was in his apartment from 30 years ago, not in his 55-year-old body, but in his 25-year-old body with all his memories. No matter how many times he thinks about it, the reason for his regression must be because of that constellation's miracle. There's no other explanation. He says he's still very confused, but it doesn't matter, and asks, how about heading to work? The dagger in his hand is a bronze artifact, a self-defense dagger. It doesn't dull easily. Shin thinks he was lucky to get it at this time. Even if his level is low, he knows its hidden ability. He releases energy over the dagger. The system notifies that absorption rate is being calculated. The base stat absorption rate of a bronze artifact is 10%. Previous use of the artifact is applied retroactively, resulting in a final rate of 20%. Sang thinks that even if the rate is low because he hasn't used it in a while, what really matters is the hidden ability. The system notifies that mana synchronization with the Venomoth dagger has begun, entering the consciousness space. Hyun thinks that the subconscious space is one he must pass through to eat an artifact, and he always gets nervous when he's here. A chicken is summoned in front of him, and notifications arrive saying preparations for absorbing the Venomoth dagger are complete. Roasted chicken with olive oil. The protagonist says it's a relief, it's a normal meal. He was worried a bug would appear, and if it's something like this, he can eat it anytime. More notifications come in. Dagger absorption initiated. Permanently gained attribute. Agility +2. Hidden ability acquired. Demonic strike. The dagger, fully absorbed, will disappear forever. Shin says it's a pity it was destroyed. He got a useful skill just like he planned, and now has to go. Meanwhile, in Dungeon 85, Team Yoon Daekyung, a young man approaches and calls him team leader. Yoon asks what it is. The transport team leader says one of the members left. He's a rookie who joined 4 days ago. Yoon says not to worry about Mr. Shin. It's been decided that he'll join his group. The transport leader, a bit confused, asks if he's joining the player group and not the transport team. The team leader says he himself gave the final approval and asks if there's a problem. The transport leader says of course there is. He just awakened and hasn't even finished the player academy. Putting someone like that on a team has never happened before. If he does this, the teams will be unbalanced. How should the workload be distributed? Yoon cuts him off, calling his name and asking whether he's not the one managing everything, including group logistics and contribution systems. The transport leader says yes, apologizes, and walks off. The team leader says if you let those bastards talk too much. A hunter asks why he accepted him. Yoon asks if he too and says if someone's going to lose their life, it'll be him, not us. He needs to be eliminated quickly so those guys will shut up. The protagonist approaches and says that from today he'll be working as a player and introduces himself. Everyone looks at him with suspicion and the hunters smile. Shin notices that everyone is very expressive and wonders if they won't even try to hide their faces. The team leader says the rookie finally arrived and says it's a pleasure to meet him. Thought he'd arrive late on his first day as a player. He also mentions his weapon and asks if that's a longsword. Sang replies yes, he's watched a lot of YouTube videos. Yoon says the longsword is one of the hardest swords to use. Hyun says he'll try to at least protect himself and asks them to trust him. The team leader laughs and says he's got spirit. That's great. Men need to have spirit. Now let's start this raid and tear it up. Once they enter, they need to wait at the entrance. They begin entering the portal. Yoon watches the protagonist going in and thinks, watched YouTube videos? That's ridiculous. Does he think dungeons are a joke? He thinks the guy's too arrogant just because he awakened and became a player. Looks like he wants to die. Well, according to the strategy of this raid, this orc dungeon is a wall of despair for rookies. He'll find out his place soon enough and calls him a stupid idiot and wonders about that stupid idiot. Meanwhile, they enter the dungeon. Yoon thinks this is insane. Who the hell is he? Shin defeated all the monsters alone effortlessly and now has a terrifying aura around him. Orcs, common monsters in games, novels, and fantasy films. Orcs are familiar creatures, so there are many prejudices about them. The prejudice that orcs are weak. Of course, compared to dragons and other monsters, orcs are simple, violent brutes, so they're indeed considered weaker. That's why many rookie players, overconfident, ignore that trait and attack recklessly. Orcs' trait is simple. Standing at 2.5 meters tall and weighing 180 kilograms on average, they are brute and straightforward. An absolute difference in raw power. That's why orcs are seen as true walls of lamentation for beginners. The hunters continue walking and one of them calls Sang and says, even if he's a rookie, no one's going to go easy on him, so he better handle himself. The porter asks if he awakened and now already wants to act like a player, says he's really cocky. Hyun smiles and says he'll do his best and thinks that in any group, no one cuts you slack. The hunter tells him to forget about doing his best and think about doing it right. What's with this talk of always trying hard? The protagonist stares him down and asks if, should a monster appear, he can go to the front lines. The hunter asks if this guy is joking, until he's caught off guard by the sight of a giant orc. Shin thinks it's finally his first battle since returning in time and says he'll take care of that one. The hunter uses his shield to block the orc's attack and calls Shin crazy, asking if he has a death wish. With movements that slow, does he really think he can handle a greatsword? Sang says he could have handled it alone and thanks him for the help. The hunter tells him to stop talking and prove what he's made of. Hyun tells him to look ahead and pay attention. The hunter says the kid doesn't even know how to thank someone and still wants to talk back until he's nearly hit by the giant's axe. But the team leader blocks it with his shield and knocks down the orc, asking if the two came for a stroll and tells them to focus. The hunter apologizes. The blonde guy says that's the captain. Yoon tells everyone to get out of the way, he'll take care of this one. The giant charges toward him to attack. The team leader says it's nothing and strikes the opponent, leaving the orc motionless. The hunters say, as expected, the leader is amazing and finished the monster instantly. The giant opens its terrifying eyes, raises its axe, and attacks. But Yoon backs off and says he underestimated it. The protagonist watches and thinks that Daekyung might be the strongest here, but in the end, his level is only 50. Just as he suspected, he didn't even hit the monster's vital point. The team leader says this orc is tough. He attacks the monster again, hitting it squarely. The giant falls to the ground and the hunters say they did it. He took down an orc by himself. Yoon laughs and says an orc is no big deal, asking if everyone's okay. They say, of course, they trusted him completely, until they hear noises and a horde of orcs approaches. The warriors realize there's a high orc, and even an armored orc among them, and ask what to do. Daekyung says in situations like this, the safest move for the team is to retreat, then wonders what's going on. One orc was already tough, but those? Shin asks if he can try facing them. The hunters ask what this guy just said, and if he's gone crazy, and say they'll deal with this idiot. The team leader says he understands. He's excited after awakening. Sang steps forward and attacks. Yoon calls him an idiot and says if he keeps going, he'll die. Hyun defeats an orc with a single strike and says great swords really are amazing. The warriors ask what just happened. Did he really cut an orc in half? The protagonist asks, even so, am I still just level 1? The system shows his stats. The orcs go into a frenzy and charge toward him, and Shin, sword in hand, says that even with a low level, he has a ton of experience. Sang slices through the monsters as he passes them. An orc tries to attack, but Hyun dodges and asks if they have any idea how many he's already defeated in his youth. The protagonist lands a hit. People are shocked and ask if that guy's really Shin, saying this is no joke. He's really taking them all down alone. Sang heads toward the last one and says only one's left, the armored orc. The giant charges at him, striking and shattering the ground. Hyun dodges, stares it down, and attacks, slashing with his sword. The team leader says its skin is too thick. His attack didn't go in clean, and tells him to be careful. The protagonist dodges another strike and says, wait a second, activating his skill. Demon Bash activated. Applies 2.0 seconds of stun to monsters or players hit. However, the duration and success rate vary depending on the target's resistance. Shin says, that's right, just stay right there. The orc screams loudly, then its head is cut off. Everyone looks on in shock and asks what the hell that was. Didn't he awaken just 3 days ago? And that stun skill? It doesn't even look like a normal stun. Even famous players can only stun for 1.5 seconds. And he's wielding that great sword perfectly. Did he really learn this on YouTube? Daekyung wonders about the stun. It wasn't even against a regular orc, but an armored one. And this guy only awakened less than a week ago. Where did he get that skill? The system notifies that his level has increased and he meets the requirements and earns the F-rank title, Dog Who Doesn't Know Fear. The level up was expected, but the title wasn't. The system notifies that he has status points available and can choose an attribute to improve. Shin thinks he knows exactly where to invest. In his previous life, he realized too late that the luck attribute directly affects skill success rate and chances of getting rare artifacts. For him, this isn't a choice. It's a necessity. The system notifies that the player's luck has slightly increased. The team leader asks if he's really Shin and if that skill was actually a stun. Where did he get something like that? Sang thinks he's finally enjoying his skills in this new life and that he only got that skill after awakening. Yoon yells, asking if he thinks any of this makes sense, and tells him not to dodge the question. He must have gotten lucky and picked up some artifact. He asks if it's a diamond rank artifact or something even higher. Hyun asks if he wants to take a look. Daekyung grabs the sword and says if that's the case, he won't refuse, and asks if there's nothing special about it, so that skill is really his. He thinks after 2 years in dungeons and reaching level 50, even he doesn't have a skill like that. If this keeps up, today's reward distribution, until someone calls out and says the mid-boss has appeared. The leader says to head over. Taking care of the orcs was easy thanks to him. But next time, don't get too excited. That skill won't be useful against the next boss, the demon orc. The protagonist thinks he almost forgot the real reason he came back in time and joined this team again. And a voice asks if Yoon is scared. Shin asks, and if he defeats the demon orc alone, can he keep the reward artifact? That's the reward for slaying it. A scarlet stone. An artifact that can drop at a low rate from killing a demon orc. But even if you kill hundreds of demon orcs, the chance of even seeing it drop is extremely rare. In fact, it's one of the hardest artifacts to get. However, in Sang's past life, after the team failed to defeat the demon orc, he remembers another team getting the Scarlet Stone and bragging about it. People congratulated their leader and asked how he got it, saying that just selling it on the market would bring in good money. This artifact has the skill, Delay. Hyun asked about Delay and thinks this skill is absolutely essential for him right now. In the present, the protagonist observes and says that from what he knows, this team uses a contribution-based reward system. So, if he defeats it alone, there should be no problem. The leader stays silent. Shin thinks that the Delay skill is something he must secure for his future, but a rookie talking that arrogantly won't be accepted easily by the group. The hunters ask if he's gone insane and say this bastard's getting too full of himself. He killed a few orcs and now thinks he's in charge. Yoon tells them to calm down. It might be possible. The warriors are outraged. Daekyung says that if they can't defeat it, he'll have to fight solo and take it down alone. Does he understand that? Sang thinks that was easier than expected and says then he's out of this fight. The leader says do whatever you want. The blonde says wait, take me with you. Yoon calls him a cocky brat in his thoughts. Just because he got a strong skill, he thinks he's hot stuff. He's going to put him in his place and shut that mouth. He'll show what real experience means. A light reflects in his eyes. As the boss room door opens, the system notifies that they're entering the mid-boss chamber. The place is dark and a sound echoes, and there, chained up, is the plasma-hungry mid-boss, Demon Orc. Daekyung tells everyone to get ready for battle and thinks that visually it's terrifying, but according to the guides, it should be easy to beat. He tells them to flank it and attack from behind. The leader thinks about fighting solo and apologizes, but that's never going to happen for Hyun. The hunters charge toward the monster, and Yoon says the first strike is his, until he crashes to the ground and gets up asking what's happening. The protagonist watches and thinks he charged in so confidently he thought it would work, but he just dove into the fight like an idiot without thinking. And in his past life, he did the same thing and failed. The blonde asks what to do now and says, if this keeps up, everyone will die. Yoon thinks, first the high orc and now this, and wonders why this monster is so strong. He knew he couldn't trust those guides 100% and says they don't need to defeat the mid-boss, they'll retreat. Shin smiles. They call him a bastard and say he's really going through with this. Daekyung says regardless, everyone retreat. The demon orc has a narrow field of vision, so they need to escape through the side stairs. The hunters say that was close. In the end, it's just a mid-boss. The leader says that as for him, Sang, if he ends up losing his life, he shouldn't blame anyone. Hwon smiles and tells him not to worry. Even if he dies, that's not going to happen. The boss charges at him, and the protagonist thinks that when comparing his raw stats to those of a demon orc, there's no way he can win. But he has something far more valuable: experience. He strikes the giant. The orc lets out a sound. The blonde guy says he heard a clang and asks if he just parried that axe, commenting that his hands have gone numb. Shin says that in the end, for now, he can only dodge. He observes the glowing stone on the orc's body and thinks it's been a while. The Scarlet Stone. The reason he's so obsessed with the stone now is because the special skill delay perfectly complements his stunning skill Demon Bash. Currently, Demon Bash causes a 2.0 second stun, which is already good, but it has little room to evolve. However, his unique ability to consume artifacts allows him to combine different skills. And he wonders, what if he gets a skill that lets him stack Demon Bash effects endlessly? Then his dream strategy, Infinite Stun, could become a reality. With the delay, that would be totally possible. He asks the orc if it's not going to attack. The monster suddenly charges. Sang says, "That's it, come at me." Only then can he exploit its opening. Hyun slashes its body. The orc slams its axe into the ground. The protagonist activates his skill. Demon Bash, stun state applied for 2.0 seconds. The leader asks if that skill even works on a mid-boss and says, "This is just insane." Shin says orcs are predictable, even demon ones. Then an attack comes toward him and Sang blocks it with his sword, saying he forgot about that. Its self-regeneration ability. Because of that, the stun was removed early. To stun it again, he'll have to wait 15 seconds. Hyun says that's exactly why he needs delay and thinks that for now, his only option is a head-on fight. The protagonist strikes and says that in that case, he just needs to beat it the old-fashioned way. The blonde tells his boss it's serious now. They need to leave. That Shin guy's skill isn't working anymore. The leader asks why, thinking even without being able to stun it, even against a stronger opponent, how does he still have that confident expression? And wonders if this rookie is really a rookie. Sang says it reminds him of something from his past life. When stats aren't enough, concentrate all strength into a single point. Forget the feeling of slashing and even use the enemy's force against them. Hyun advances with immense pressure and strikes. The system congratulates him for defeating the mid-boss Demon Orc. Level up. Earned the E-rank title. Demon Hunter. Effect. When fighting mid or higher tier bosses, HP regeneration increases 5-fold. The protagonist says that's already 2 titles. Is this the power of solo hunting? The leader approaches with his team, visibly stunned, and Shin thinks if he wants to avoid trouble now, there's only one way. He says he nearly died. If the boss hadn't taken damage from the captain, he wouldn't have beaten it. The blonde laughs and says, as expected from the leader, and asks when he even attacked. Yoon is confused and says it makes no sense. They fall silent for a moment and Sang wonders if he's aware. He's giving him a chance to save face. Daekyung looks at the stone, smiles, and says they completely lost, then asks if they're going to pull themselves together. They beat the mid-boss, so now it's time to get ready for the final boss. As they walk away, they say as expected from the captain. It's not like Shin did everything alone, but that stunning ability sure is enviable. Though, in the end, it didn't work on the mid-boss. After everyone leaves, Hyun smiles and says it's time to test the Scarlet Stone. The system notifies him of the unconscious rift. Homemade bibim naengmyeon with boiled pork. The protagonist wonders if things will go well. After all, who could resist this classic combo? The system notifies that preparations for absorbing the Scarlet Stone are complete. Absorption in progress. Due to the base absorption rate of silver tier artifacts 20%, strength and HP increased by +2. and special effect delay acquired. The delay effect obtained through absorption can be combined with skills. Shin wonders why he's feeling nervous about this. Combined with Demon Bash, delay has now been added to the skill. If used before the first stun ends, a second stun is guaranteed. The third activation has a 90% chance of applying, the fourth 60%, and the fifth 30%, Sang says, a guaranteed 4-second stun, and wonders if he'd only theorized it, but it really worked. The team leader approaches and asks if they can talk. Hyun agrees and asks what about. Yoon says the next challenge is the final boss room, the Berserker Orc. Hyun asks if he wants him to sit out again. Daekyung replies no, and says if he can't make use of a teammate like him, he's not worthy of being leader. He's counting on him from now on. The two shake hands, and the protagonist asks if the conditions are still the same. The leader says yes. The blonde says they're ready to enter the boss room. The leader says understood, let's go, and tells the team to stay sharp. The blonde glares and Shin doesn't understand. Yoon says this is the last one. Afterward, they'll go out for drinks. Sang wonders, did he just glare at me? In the dungeon, final boss room, the monster growls. This is the final boss, the Berserker Orc. The hunters approach. Daekyung says he'll go first. Hyun steps forward and says to follow him and thinks the Berserker Orc has lower resistance to skills than the Demon Orc. Stunning it will be much easier. If they stay calm, there'll be no problems. And he wonders, did I really just say, follow me? Have I ever spoken with such confidence in my life? He thinks when he was young, he was always afraid, and when old, he only tried to survive at any cost. This time, he can't live the same way, he must change. His past was weak, and so was his future. To fix that, he has to show and prove himself to everyone here. The leader watches him fighting and says he's a monstrous bastard. With overwhelming strength, the protagonist slashes the monster and says, the 4-second stun starts now. Yoon charges in with his team and tells everyone to go wild. The monster cries out under the onslaught, and the system congratulates him for defeating the final boss and clearing the dungeon. Orc's Bloody Altar. The hunters ask if that dungeon wasn't way easier than it should have been, and how much they saved thanks to that stun. The porters wonder if he already has a fixed team and say it's worth asking, calling out to Hyung. A voice replies, saying what is it? He's got to make a living too. Shin thinks they probably aren't even really interested. The system notifies that he leveled up and received the D rank title, with overwhelming strength. Title rank D. Effect. Increases the duration of negative status effects by 10%. Sang says he's stacking up titles one after another. In his past life, he never got titles like this, and he thinks compared to him, he's still nothing. The Phantom Swordsman of Kyungsoo collected titles, perfected the sword, South Korea's strongest player. With countless nicknames, just 2 years after the rise of players, he had already surpassed level 500. In Sang's past life, he was just a distant idol, but now there's no guarantee he can't catch up. If he goes all in at full speed, maybe he has a chance. Daekyung asks what he's doing. Hyun says he's just stretching. The team leader says good job and tells him to take this. He hands him an item. The protagonist is surprised and asks since when does he give things this easily. Yoon says that this time he basically carried the team. Besides, it's just a bronze level item. It's not worth much. Shin asks if he isn't being too honest. Daekyung replies that if it were expensive, he wouldn't have given it, and thinks he's giving it because they won't see each other again. It hurts, but he already knew that. But he also realizes the world Sang lives in now is different from theirs. The blonde watches, fuming, wondering if they're really going to give more to that bastard just because he showed off a few skills. Isn't that a bit unfair? He calls them idiots and says to just wait until he becomes strong. Back at Sang's house, he's smiling, saying this is what he plays for. A porter makes only about 200,000 won a day, and on top of that, he earned way more than average. And there's still the bonus, Berserker's Ring. A ring only obtainable from orcs that increases the wearer's stamina. Hyun says even though it's bronze level, it's a free artifact with a lightweight skill. The system notifies the skill, consumes 1 mana per second, and reduces the weight of all equipped artifacts to 1 G. The protagonist says now he truly understands why it's bronze level. Regular players would run out of mana before they could even swing a sword. Well, if they were regular players. And he thinks, even though he discovered his abilities after turning 50, he studied a lot more because of that. In his past life, he had already used artifacts that required mana. The result was truly shocking. The special effect of artifacts that require mana includes a penalty, but they become cost-free. The system notifies that mana synchronization with the Berserker's Ring is starting. Shin wonders if a penalty will occur, then shrugs it off. What matters is gaining more skills. At Private Club H, Gangnam-gu, Seoul, the blonde asks if he's serious, saying that bastard stayed stunned for 4 seconds. The other guy asks if he's yelling. The blonde apologizes. The big guy asks what's going on and if he wants him to get revenge. The blonde says no. That bastard must be rich. The big guy asks what he wants him to do. The blonde says it's business, and he wants revenge. The blonde girl asks if he isn't close to him, and suddenly, the blonde has his ear ripped off by the guy with a sword in hand who asks if they think they're his slaves or personal assistants. Alcohol is poured over the severed ear. The blonde screams in pain, and the guy says he'll pay for that, charging the price of an ear, and asks where that bastard is now. At the Jamsil training ground, the protagonist sits on the steps and says, "Who would have thought the berserker's ring would taste like cold cucumber soup?" He still feels terribly nauseous, but in the end, the effort always pays off. He spins his sword in the air and catches it again, feeling that it's really lighter. Weight reduction, special effect, permanent activation, no cooldown. Due to the Artifact Devourer ability, the original mana cost of the skill was removed. As a penalty, the weight reduction effect was halved. The perceived weight of all equipped artifacts is now 100 G. Shin says that at least for now, he'll carry only a greatsword to get used to it, and he's satisfied. Now, the next step. The system shows his data and status menu. Sang thinks he needs to start drawing attention from constellations. Since it's one constellation per player, he has to choose very carefully. Ideally, it would be a constellation that matches his main stat, luck. If so, it would be perfect. He says that for now, his attributes still aren't enough to attract a constellation's attention, so the only path is insane training. Elsewhere, a car stops. Hyun gets out and says he nearly died for real, wondering if training for 3 days straight with no sleep and then driving for hours was too much, and says at least he got a skill. The system notifies two-handed sword training, passive skill, basic technique, swordsman, skill level, increases adaptability to all swords except daggers and one-handed swords. In dungeon number 101, a solo player-only dungeon, the protagonist says that if this were in Seoul, the wait to enter would take months, so driving a long distance is nothing compared to that. He looks to the side and notices a car, wondering if they really followed him to this mountain road, and thinks whatever they want, he'll settle it inside the dungeon. People enter the portal. It's the men from earlier. A voice asks if this isn't supposed to be a solo player-only dungeon. Shin, leaning against a rock, says there's no way he entered the wrong portal. This place is his. The leader asks if he's not just some random idiot. Sang thinks, as expected, this isn't a normal group setup and says he won't report them if they leave now. He notes they've discarded healers and mages. The team is made only of swordsmen and archers, a pack of hyenas that hunt only humans. The big guy says this trash is trying to act tough. The other guy calls him an idiot and says he'll be taken out here and no one will even know. Hyun thinks that in his past life, these kinds of groups were nearly wiped out by the player association. And yeah, he knows very well how they operate. He also thinks that in these groups, the most dangerous one was always the archer. The archer says to hurry and finish this. The protagonist asks if they really thought he was waiting here for nothing, and that soon there'll be 4 corpses. What are they going to do about that outside? The big guy steps forward and calls him a bastard. Their leader interrupts and says, to settle this the easy way. The big guy says, that is the easy way. Shin says exactly, and to listen to the boss. The big guy tells him to shut up. He approaches with his sword and repeats that, calling him a bastard. Sang stares him down, thinking that the law of the strongest? There's no better phrase for a dungeon. Monsters always threatened his life, as did humans trying to steal artifacts. People like himself were always a threat to his survival. If you're weak, you'll be devoured. Dungeons are, by nature, lawless lands, so if you want to live, eliminate. That was the lesson of his past life, and the truth of this world. In short, everything that happens next, Hyun eliminates them easily. He thinks it's self-defense and asks what's wrong. Aren't they going to attack? The other 3 rush in. The leader says to gain some distance first and to cover, until they can form up. The archer says got it, wondering if his partner died. He was level 100, even if dumb. That guy who awakened recently? The protagonist spins his sword and asks where they think they're going. The archer fires and says that bastard is a monster. Shin stares him down, breaks all the arrows midair, and eliminates him with his sword. The leader wonders if he just threw a massive sword like a spear. One guy asks, who the hell is this guy? The leader widens his eyes, realizing the sword was thrown far away, meaning he's unarmed. Now's his most vulnerable moment. He says, go now. The sword is still stuck in the archer. Sang moves quickly toward his sword, eyes widen. The 2 attackers charge, saying to finish him. A bright light bursts out. The guy asks what the hell that is. Hyun kills the leader with his sword and says, that was brutal. Afterwards, the protagonist puts on his coat and checks his data again, saying he really wanted to avoid that situation. But looking at the results, it was a huge gain. He thinks that in terms of stats, he's already at the level of a level 50+ player, and wonders how long it's been since he reincarnated. He puts his hand in his pocket and takes out a ring. It's the recovery ring. Effect: Uses 10 mana to immediately remove all negative effects from the user. If used again within 1 minute, the mana cost doubles with each consecutive use. Shin says that guy who charges in without thinking probably never imagined he had a status cleansing artifact and thinks, if he had trusted blindly in the stiffness effect, he'd have been screwed. He says next time, he has to be more careful. The system notifies that mana synchronization with the recovery ring is starting. In Dungeon 101, Inner Entrance, there are monsters nearby. They look back and see Sang with his sword and his eyes covered. He thinks the condition to earn the Lucky Day title was definitely something like this. He must defeat over 500 monsters while blindfolded. The goblins walk, glancing back. Hyun asks when these monsters are going to show up. The goblins grin. The protagonist senses a presence. He needs to be extremely attuned to wind flow and sound. Focus must maintain this state of concentration. In his mind, water stirs, growing more and more turbulent, and Shin says he's got it now. The monsters approach and Sang strikes with his sword, wiping them out with a single slash, and says the sensation of slicing feels good. An attack approaches. Hyun blocks it and says he already told them. He's got the hang of it. He grabs the arrow and says, hold on a sec. The monster freezes. The protagonist says today he's been through some dangerous situations, but thanks to that he remembered things from the past, and somehow his perception awakened. Whatever. He calls them bastards. The goblins charge and Shin cuts through several of them effortlessly. Only one is left, screaming, and is quickly finished. The ground is covered in plasma and goblin body parts. The system notifies that his level increased and he earned the D rank title, Lucky Day. Sang says it doesn't even feel like he swung his sword that much. More notifications come in. Lucky Day bonus effect. After obtaining this title, for every additional monster of the same species defeated, +0. 1 luck is gained, stacking up to +10 luck. Hyun says the titles just keep piling up. More goblins approach and are startled to see all their companions wiped out. The protagonist turns and says that since he got it, why not stack more bonus stats? He checks his data and starts laughing, asking if he really raised his luck by 30 just from one title, and says that's worth at least 500 million, maybe even $1 billion in profit. The atmosphere grows increasingly dark. Shin says this time, he's finally moving out of his rental apartment and asks, is it happening already? The system notifies 3 constellations are approaching. The janitor of the corrupted dimension asks if he's more interested in bringing misfortune to others than in having luck. The pilgrim wandering. The cosmos is impressed by his ingenuity and wants to talk. The goddess of fortune smiles at him and reaches out her hand. 3 powerful beings appear before him. Shin thinks that was fast and wonders. 3 of them showed up and asks, did they enjoy his little show? A constellation approaches closer and Sang wonders if maybe he was too confident and thinks he can't really say. He never experienced anything like this in his past life. The goddess of fortune is interested in him. She's intrigued, having never seen such a lucky swordsman before. Hyun comments on his own luck, saying people have told him he's pretty lucky. He feels relieved. Seems like all 3 want to form a contract with him, and wonders if it's best to take some time to confirm. The system notifies that the janitor of the fallen dimension praises him for his hidden cruelty. The protagonist thinks that the janitor is a common constellation among eliminators, and wonders if he got interested because Hyun wiped out all those goblins so quickly. The pilgrim of the great cosmos is curious about his true intentions. Shin doesn't know why he showed up. He's sure that constellation only appears for players with the potential to become saints. In that case, he has to assume it's because of the goddess of fortune, and thinks he's heard she's quite popular, even among other constellations. The goddess watches him and says she has no particular wishes. Even if he chooses someone else now, she promises they can still form a contract later. Sang is impressed and asks if she's serious. He nearly forgot, but that's an incredible benefit. An archer who could hit a target even when shooting into an empty room. Blessed by the world, he never had to worry about running out of arrows. That was the miraculous archer, Hashimoto Yuki. The miraculous archer was the most praised among all archers. Thanks to his destructive power and high luck stat, even though some believed the stories were exaggerated, the truth was all due to his 2 constellations. The one who made the impossible possible was the goddess of fortune. Hyun says that when 3 constellations appear like this, he needs time to think. The 3 constellations urge him to forget his doubts and choose his own destiny. One constellation says he might be making the wrong decision. The protagonist thinks he can't just trust these constellations. No doubt the goddess of fortune is incredible. But if no other constellations ever come to him, this decision could define his entire future as a player. During his first 10 years as a player, only 1 constellation ever came to him, the late model student. That presence was like a ray of light for him, and he was happy. Despite the miserable journey, he believed he had a bright future. But in the end, nothing changed. Nothing happened until he turned 55. That's right, he never really understood how powerful a constellation could be, all because of those ridiculous requirements. Though the power of a constellation is important for a player's career, he was never able to use it. In fact, he didn't even care. Well, in the end, he only managed to regress thanks to him. He should be grateful, but that means he must be careful. He has to assume he won't get another chance to regress. And so, he considers divine powers, destruction, luck, and himself. He taps the accept button. The system notifies that he has formed a contract with the goddess of fortune. Even if the player dies, the constellation contract remains valid for 30 years. A being from another dimension watches Shin closely. A being from another dimension observes Shin and the goddess of fortune as they form the contract. 15 friendly constellations congratulate him on the contract and wish him good fortune. 3 hostile constellations, who had intended to contract with him, declare that they will do everything to interfere. Sang wonders why so many constellations are interested in this, and says either way, good luck to the both of them. He takes her hand and the goddess of fortune praises him for his wise decision. Hyun says, now then, how about, only to be interrupted by the system, stating that the goddess of fortune, contract effect, wants to know his wish. First, all attack attempts will be critical hits. Second, when acquiring a unique or higher rank artifact, its hidden effect will be unlocked. Third, there's a 100% chance of obtaining an artifact from boss or mid-boss monsters, even if their ranks are low. The protagonist asks if those aren't way too broken. The system notifies a fourth. When he levels up and uses earned stat points, investing in luck increases +2 instead of +1. This effect applies retroactively to all previously used bonus points. Shin asks if it's still not over and if it's really a 100% crit chance. Also, guaranteed artifact drops? He says this is all thanks to his hard work. The goddess of fortune asks what he'll do with the other constellations' offers. Sang says they can both leave now. The pilgrim of the great cosmos says he'll wait until they meet again. The janitor of the fallen dimension warns he'll do everything to take Shin's head. The goddess of fortune praises Shin for standing his ground. Hyun thinks that with the effects of the goddess of fortune, he won't have to worry about the near future, and he needs to calm down. A better opportunity will come later. In Dungeon 101 Final Boss Room, the two clash. The goddess of fortune looks on, surprised. The protagonist asks if that's all he's got and tells him to do better. The impacts crash. This is the final boss. The Goblin Lord consumed by greed. He attacks and Shin holds firm with his sword. The boss emits a loud noise, creating massive pressure in the area. The system notifies Goblin Lord applied status effect overload on him. Sang thinks it finally showed up. Overload. It's not as cool as stun, but it forcibly lowers the target's morale. Hyun activates recovery. The boss attacks again, causing a huge impact, only to look confused when he sees his attack was blocked. The protagonist says that even though the skill has obvious limitations, it could be useful against weaker monsters. The system notifies recovery skill activated. Shin says now it's time to test his luck. More notifications arrive. Overload status removed by recovery. The pressure intensifies and Sang slashes his opponent, asking if he really thought that would work. He activates Demonic Strike and says, 2 seconds. Hyun slashes the boss rapidly multiple times, saying another 2 seconds. The system notifies, first delay effect activated. Stun extended by 2.0 seconds. The protagonist moves quickly. The second delay has a 90% chance to trigger. Stun extended again. Shin smiles and closes in, asking if it works on the second hit too. The boss is defeated and crashes to the floor with a loud thud. The system congratulates him for clearing the dungeon's suffocating goblin swamp. He leveled up. Sang feels relieved and more notifications come in. Earned D rank title, Don't Touch Me. Hyun says it's finally over. The system adds, extra effect may enhance one of his skills. Player system will apply buffs accordingly. The protagonist says first there were those thugs who followed him, and now the dungeon, and wonders if he's overloading his body. The goddess of fortune says his luck must be amazing if he managed to do all that today. Shin asks if most people wouldn't just say he's skilled. The goddess says good luck is a skill too, and she's grateful to support such a lucky player. Sang says she changed her mind fast. The goddess of fortune says it's all thanks to herself. Hyun says let him raise his luck stat first, asks if his luck is already above 100, and thinks that once a stat hits 100, any related effects get a 10% bonus. For example, evasion increases dodge rate, and luck boosts drop rates and artifact quality. The system notifies Kudness's shield, a shield left behind by the Goblin Warrior. Using mana will boost the shield's effect, turning any damage into HP recovery. However, mana will be consumed throughout the conversion. The protagonist says it doesn't matter. Thanks to her, he's guaranteed an artifact, and wonders if raising his luck increases the rank of dropped artifacts. The system notifies that Mana's synchronization with Kudnis's shield is beginning. The goddess hugs him and Shin thinks she's probably going to be even more troublesome than the late model student. Near Jamsil Station mission area, the receptionist says no. Sang says he understands, but he has his own ideas. The receptionist apologizes again and asks if he can't reconsider, saying he doesn't understand how many bodies she's had to see today. Hyun thinks he can't let her stop him. 2 hours earlier, Hyun is driving, saying he was worried since it was a goblin shield. Luckily, it was just rice and kimchi. The car stops and the protagonist checks the warning lights, asking what's going on with all these alerts, and if he'll need a new car. He thinks, hold on, the car is one thing, but he also needs to move out soon. Statistically, he's more likely to get involved in crimes at his current level. He can't live in constant fear. It would be better to move to the player city where there's constant surveillance, and with all the artifacts he'll need, he should consider buying used gear to make the process easier. He pauses, thinking about money. He needs a lot of money, and right now, there's only one place where he can earn that. The system was created along with the era of players. With its appearance came missions and an organization that manages them, the Player Association. In a system controlled by the association, he can make it. He shouts for the mission arena to wait for him. Back to the present. Still no progress. The receptionist tells him to enter a dungeon appropriate for his level and asks why he's trying to enter a level 100 dungeon. The protagonist says he's confident he won't cause any trouble and that she can trust him, thinking that even though he's only level 17, going to a low-level area now would be a waste of time. The secretary says someone else once told her the exact same thing and is now begging to go to a lower-level region. Shin thinks he understands what she means. Many people have lost their lives by underestimating their abilities. Still, he must stand firm and says he's not going. Someone approaches and asks if there's a problem. The receptionist replies that it's nothing. The girl who asked is from the Eden Guild. Her name is Kim Miso, level 100, player rank a plus. Sang looks surprised to see it's Kim Miso, the Devastation Sniper. He thinks she's the first player to reach level 100 and earn the title of Sniper. Despite her incredible skills, the most notable thing about her is that she's the daughter of Kim Yoon-cheol, president of Shinsung Biotech. That means Kim Miso, Shin Terry, the Dark Eliminator known for her title and as the nation's top eliminator, and one of the greatest swordsmanship players in the nation, Cho Jin-ho, are all in the same guild. She is the daughter of the Eden Guild's largest shareholder. In other words, she was born into the most privileged background in player history. Kim says she's never seen him before and had been watching, asking why he's interested in taking on a level 100 quest. Hyun replies that he needs money. The hunters around them are shocked and ask if she really approached him first, if she saw his attitude, if he's crazy, and they say to just leave him. They say she's just being nice to a level 17 newbie. The protagonist thinks he can hear them and calls them damned bastards. Miso says this place will be tough for him. Shin responds that he's well aware. 4 words: no risk, no reward. He thinks he's not acting this way because he hates her, even though he was rejected when he asked to join her party in his past life. Even if he had been rejected before, it's not like there's a grudge. Kim asks if he knows he can't proceed with the mission since solo player groups aren't allowed. Sang thinks that now that he remembers, solo player missions won't be allowed for another 4 years. He leaves laughing, saying he must have read the announcement wrong. Miso then asks if he'd like to go with her. The hunters overhear and are outraged, asking if she's serious, saying they'd love to go and are super jealous. Hyun wonders what she's planning and asks what the condition is. Kim asks if she can't just want to help a fellow player. The protagonist laughs and says the thing is, he has trouble trusting others. Miso asks if that's so, because there really is no condition. Instead of a condition, she wants him to promise one thing. If he disappoints her, he'll have to pay for it. However, if she ends up being wrong, she'll sincerely apologize for her actions. Shin thinks he gets it and wonders if she's trying to test him. He thinks she doesn't just have influence as a player. Everything she wears sends prices skyrocketing, and whatever she says ends up in dozens of articles. However, the moment she sees him as a confident player, you can bet it's the end of his career. She asks how about they go now, and he thinks this will be interesting. The driver says he'll be waiting. Kim tells him to do what he needs to do. Most guild members are busy today, so she'll need to find other teammates. Coincidentally, Miso had a reason to work with Hyun. Because of the minimum group size rule for missions, this was a big inconvenience for Kim. At that moment, she just happened to see a player overflowing with confidence. And since she didn't know how this player would react in that situation, she became interested in him. Miso asks what mission Hyun was trying to take. The receptionist asks for a minute and shows her. Kim is surprised to see it's a defense mission. Eliminate all monsters running toward the Guardian Tower. The mission will fail if the tower's core is destroyed. Monster type: wolves. Monster count: 300. Recommended level: 100. Reward: 500 million won. Miso realizes he didn't choose a gathering or assault mission, but a defense one. Due to the restrictions on those missions, they can only be completed after defeating every monster. That's why it's recommended for a team of 4 with at least one long-range damage player. She wonders if he really wants to do that alone and thinks it's a suicide mission. The protagonist asks if she's nervous, saying she got quiet so he thought she might be, and if it seems too hard, they can just wait for more people to show up. Maybe a tank, or maybe another long-range player. Or maybe, Kim interrupts him, grabbing his arm and says, "No, there's no problem at all." The system notifies that the mission has been accepted and that he will be transported to the mission site. A bright light flashes. The receptionist says that since Miss Kim is going with him, she hopes nothing bad happens. A boy asks if they think he'll make it. A hunter replies, "No way," and asks how a level 17 newbie is supposed to clear a level 100 dungeon. And if he didn't notice, she has a plan, since she's the youngest player to reach A+ rank. And if they haven't heard of the new ranking system created by the Player Association, and how it was made because it's hard to judge a player's strength by level alone. His partner replies yes, and that there are 2 criteria to obtain a rank. First, the number of cleared dungeons. Second, the player's overall combat sense. Miso received A+ purely for her combat sense. The hunter says he gets it, but asks why the hell A+. His partner asks if it isn't obvious. It means there are monsters stronger than her. But that's not the point now, because that guy just went into a dungeon with her, and he's lucky. In the defense mission, it's nighttime, and the wolves are coming. Kim is up high with her bow, thinking she has to take responsibility for her words. She'll do her best to help him if things get dangerous. The protagonist walks confidently. Miso watches him and thinks she hopes he learns a lesson from this. 30 minutes earlier, she asked what he said. Shin replied it's exactly what she heard, not to interfere unless he asks for help. And as long as she focuses only on support, he'll give her 5%. Kim is surprised and asks if it was just her imagination. Sang replies yes, and that earning 5% just for providing support should be a good deal. Miso asks if he said that because of terms and says it's impossible for him to handle this. There are at least 300 of them. This mission is hard even for a level 100 player like herself. Hyun tells her to wait and see. Back to the present, Kim says it's fine, but she'll earn an extra 1% for every monster he doesn't kill, and he earns nothing if he lets 95 of them through, and she asks if he understood. The wolves approach, their eyes terrifying. The protagonist takes his battle stance and apologizes in advance, saying that's never going to happen. He stares at the wolves and says he's going to finish them all. The beasts rush toward him. Miso looks surprised as he takes out several with just one strike, effortlessly. Shin says they make a nice sound when they die. Kim wonders if he really wasn't just some arrogant player, thinking his attacks were flawless. His stance emphasizes superior reach, something Jinho, a warrior in her guild, always talks about, a perfect balance between offense and defense. Plus, he avoids unnecessary movements and takes down multiple enemies with each blow. But he still has a long way to go. There are just too many. These aren't monsters a typical level 17 player could handle. Miso watches him, smiling, and thinks to wait. She knew something felt off from the start, and wonders why all the monsters are frozen. And she notes it's not like they were stunned, and asks if he used stun. She watches carefully, noting the strikes, and says that was close, thinking anyone would notice he used stun. Even if he's being generous, it seems to have lasted 4 seconds, in which case he'll have more than enough time to kill all the monsters. She wonders who the hell he is. As Sang slays the enemies, he wonders why it's so easy, until he notices something and looks closely. Suddenly, all the wolves are blasted away by a massive impact. Hyun says, there it is, the black wolf. The beast opens its enormous mouth, letting out a loud roar. The protagonist thinks he's never faced it before, and wonders why he feels nostalgic. The system notifies that due to the black wolf, he is now under the stun debuff. Shin wonders if it's the same effect as his own. Lightning strikes toward Kim, and notifications appear saying that, thanks to her current artifact, she avoided the stun debuff. She thinks the black wolf uses that too and almost forgot about it. And here she is criticizing him while he's in danger. She'll assume he has a way to stun enemies, but for him to have a way to remove the effect, especially at his level, that's highly unlikely. The system notifies that due to recovery effects, the stun debuff has been removed. Shin moves swiftly. Miso watches in shock, asking how that's possible, and thinks it's an almost perfect stance and an extremely long stun. And she wonders if he can even remove debuffs, despite being just a level 17 player. The black wolf is confused, and Sang approaches him and asks if he's surprised, thinking it makes sense. His prey, who should have been under the stun effect, suddenly started moving again. That brief moment of panic. Hyun strikes him with his sword and thinks he gave him the chance to finish the job. He jumps to attack again, thinking it was like he had stunned him. The wolf crashes to the ground, causing a massive impact. The protagonist says his clothes are all dirty and, since he's already messy, asks how about having a little fun. Kim, from atop the building, watches him smiling and wonders who the hell this guy is. The system notifies about the defense mission. Defeat all monsters. Wolf-type monsters defeated. 299. Target monsters, 300. Level up. Title earned. Rank D, fearless. Description: any negative status effects caused by wolf-type monsters will be ignored, except for bosses. Shin glances at his partner and thinks she's starting to believe in his abilities. She had been looking at him with disdain before this, and he says he guesses he'll have to keep the show going, asking how about moving on to the grand finale. The wolf boss approaches, and Sang asks if he's ready. The boss lets out an extremely loud sound and slams the ground, shattering it. Hyun says he remembers clearly. Its specialty is erratic attacks. But 30 years from now, all patterns will have been analyzed and he's sorry. The protagonist strikes quickly and says he knows all its moves. Beast plasma spreads, and the system notifies that due to the Wolf Lord's resistance, Demon Strike did not activate. Shin says that must be the advantage of being a level 100 boss. Kim watches and says he's insane, thinking there's a lot to say about him. Not only does he have a way to remove the stun debuff, but he also wields that sword like a feather. The boss charges at him with its mouth wide open, ready to attack, but Sang dodges. The boss tries again and Hyun blocks. The boss looks confused and Miso thinks he's also aware of every irregular pattern of the Wolf Lord. The protagonist keeps blocking and says he knows everything. Kim thinks the worst part is his attitude of wanting to prove his strength to himself, and wonders who the hell he is. The fight continues. Shin runs, thinking the battle is lasting longer than he expected. He's out of tricks to show off for Kim, and the beast should tire out any minute. The Black Wolf keeps chasing him and Sang wonders why it's still so full of energy, thinking at this rate, he'll pass out before the wolf does. Then Hyun notices something as he looks at the wolf and thinks about this pattern. It's using a strong attack as bait to counter with a piercing strike. The infamous move of the Wolf Lord that took the lives of countless players, and says that even though he hasn't used this in combat before, desperate times call for desperate measures. The protagonist slices the boss's arm, but the wolf regenerates it instantly. Kim watches closely and Shin gets attacked. Miso ducks and thinks she's an idiot and has no right to be a player. Even though he showed incredible feats, she let her guard down and let this happen, and asks to be forgiven. Then she notices a light. The system notifies that Kudness's shield has turned to ashes and disappeared forever. Special effect sacrifice obtained. All damage dealt to a specific part of the body will be converted into healing. If the damage exceeds the player's total HP, they will recover HP equivalent to their max. Shin asks about an additional healing skill and says it's still useful even after being absorbed. More notifications arrive to choose a body part to apply sacrifice. Sang looks and wonders what the hell this is, and if it isn't too specific. In most cases, it's better to pick the back. But since the back is divided into 4 sections, that would be inefficient. So it makes more sense to choose the front of his body, and he realizes it worked. The system notifies that due to sacrifice, the player has recovered full HP. The protagonist says he would have been eliminated if he'd made even the slightest mistake. Too bad for him, he didn't expect to solve both problems at once. Shin activates Demon Strike, preventing his opponent from moving, and says he doesn't know if this is luck or misfortune. Who would have thought that cutting off his right arm would bypass the resistance? And says now he'll find out just how lucky he really is. Plasma splashes across the ground after Sang attacks, and he says his stun only worked up to the 3rd time, and thinks that's good enough. Hyun looks behind and says she's finally arrived. Kim approaches and says he could have told her he had a healing ability. She thought he had died. She asks if this is his second life or something, and how he knows all the Wolf Lord's patterns. She says she's met many players, but thinks he's the first one to leave her speechless. It's almost like she doesn't finish the sentence. The protagonist smiles and asks, "It's almost like?" Miso wonders what this pressure in the air is and says it's almost like she's looking at a rancor. Shin thinks she was going to say it's like she had regressed, and believes a regular player wouldn't jump to that conclusion. Kim asks if he's not going to finish him off. Sang looks at the nearly defeated wolf and says he'll eliminate it right now. The system notifies that he earned a Rank C title, Duelist. When a target is isolated with no one within 5 meters, Duelist is activated and increases all attributes by 20%. The effect disappears once the target is no longer isolated. Hyun wonders if his first Rank C title is specialized for solo combat. Miso says it looks like he received the title. The protagonist says so she knew, and asks if she already cleared this stage alone before. Kim replies of course she did everything solo. She smiles and says she'd better not lie. She only completed it thanks to her artifact. Shin says it also takes skill to acquire the right artifacts. Miso thanks him for the compliment, and thinks even so, her artifact cost over 200 million won. Comparing it to someone just using a big sword, it's simply and says to forget it and asks why doesn't he take this chance to test the effects of his new title. Sang asks what she means. The system notifies that Duelist has been activated with no one within 5 meters of the target except him. Duelist effects are active, Hyun says no way, and more notifications come saying Duelist effects have been cancelled. Kim says she'll have to leave first. She needs to call her porters to help carry everything. The protagonist thanks her and thinks that since monster parts and drops are part of mission rewards, calling a porter makes perfect sense now. Since he handled most of the work, it seems he left a good impression on her. Miso says one more thing. She's giving up her 5% share of the reward. Shin says that wouldn't be fair. Kim says it's fine and not to reject her offer. She's sure there will be more chances to work together again and to think of this as an investment. She asks if he gets it and says, "See you later." Sang thinks he can't ever let his guard down around her and says everything's clear now. Time to check out his long-awaited reward. The system notifies about the Blue Light Stone, a precious gem infused with the beliefs of the Silver Wolf clan that worships the blue light. Hyun says now that's what he's talking about and gets excited. He finally got a platinum-ranked artifact, and a platinum artifact is easily worth 1 billion won, enough to afford an apartment in Seoul. The goddess of luck asks if he believes in her now, after feeling like he just won at life. The protagonist asks why he should thank her and says it was his own luck that brought him this far. The one with the torn lips objects to the unfair luck. The player system proposes banning the goddess of luck. The goddess asks all constellations connected to the player's system to vote on the matter. Voting begins on whether to ban the one with the torn lips from the player's system. Vote count. A unanimous decision is reached. The one with the torn lips can no longer operate as a constellation. Shin asks if that really happened and says anyway, since it's a platinum artifact, it should absorb 40% of his stats. But the special effect? The system notifies Era of Dogs and Wolves. While the moon is visible inside a dungeon, the user's health recovery and regeneration rate increase 5-fold. Additionally, regardless of the moon's position, any dog or wolf-type monsters will be permanently stunned when facing the user wielding the Blue Light Stone. Sang says in other words, and asks if that means he's invincible against these dogs under a full moon. The system notifies that mana synchronization with the Blue Light Stone has begun. In the mission area's lobby, Hyun steps out of the portal and is confused to see so many people there, even some filming. People talk about how he really completed a level 100 dungeon alone, and they don't see any reason for the warrior to lie. Kim says not to worry and asks who in their right mind would let a level 17 player attempt a level 100 mission. She says she would have stopped him too. Everyone did their best. The receptionist calls out to her and Miso says she should take a closer look at Sang. The protagonist thinks he almost forgot about that staff member and feels bad for her. Guild leaders approach, making their offers, saying he seems like a great player and ask how about joining them. They begin to compete, arguing over which guild is better. Kim steps in front of them and apologizes, saying he has some matters to handle with her and hopes they'll excuse them. They say that means the Eden Guild is making a move. Miso asks, isn't it? Shin replies of course and thinks she just pulled him out of a tight spot, wondering what her plan is. Later, the car moves and on Sang's phone a notification arrives confirming the deposit of 500 million won. Kim says the reward came fast. Sang says he never expected them to pay so quickly. Miso says it's all thanks to the A-rank porters, but her influence helped too. Hyun thanks her for handling everything. Kim calls him and the system notifies it switching to secret mode. The protagonist says he knew it. No good deed comes without ulterior motives. Miso says she'll get straight to the point. She calls him and tells him to join the Eden Guild. Shin says that rather than not wasting time, it seems more like he's just too confident. Kim says there's a reason it's called Eden, and she doesn't think he'll regret it. Sang thinks he'd be lying if he said he didn't see this coming. Before regressing, he was just another member of a small guild. Back then, that feeling gave him some comfort. It was just a small guild that accepted a talentless player like him. Honestly, everything was so good until that incident. And no matter the infrastructure at the pace he's growing now, they'd probably just become shackles. For now, acting solo will help him grow more. He apologizes and asks if she's planning to start a one-man guild. They stay silent for a moment. Sang says she's pretty sharp. Miso says he knows. She's the daughter of a major corporation's CEO. With his abilities, it wasn't a hard deduction. The important part is that she's the only one who knows for now. Hyun thinks she knew he'd do this, and still laid all her cards on the table, showed genuine interest, and built a mutually beneficial connection. Seriously, she's quite the negotiator. In Player City C near Jamsil Station, a secretary approaches and says, as discussed, a deposit of 100 million won and rent of 5 million won. The protagonist says she's smiling while saying that, but she still sounds scary. The secretary says honestly he got a great deal, so she's heading off. Shin tells her to take care, thinking that was fast, and wonders if this too was the work of the goddess of luck. Elsewhere, Sang carries his things into an apartment and looks out the window, thinking how much has happened in so little time. His sudden regression, the confusion, and ever-changing situations. He spent days just trying to understand what was going on, even without success, and he wasn't sure what to do. But then his mindset completely changed. A feeling he had forgotten, the sensation of plasma flowing through his body, even if he hadn't done anything yet. Youth. In the palm of his hand, it refused to stay still. That's why he swore that this time, his life would be different. It wouldn't be pathetic like before. And then, opportunities kept coming. Kim talks on the phone with reporter Park Jongmin, saying, as expected, he's quick with the news. The protagonist wonders if she's really talking to Park Jongmin from the Player Gazette. The reporter confirms, saying he heard the guys in the same area as her. Kim replies he heard right among the players she's seen lately. Park apologizes and asks if he can get to the point. Later, the car stops. Shin gets out and thanks her for the ride. Miso tells him to wait, saying they're planning to explore an unknown portal soon. It's a free team of 4 people for players level 120 or below. Sang immediately says he's in. Kim says he rejected the guild offer so coldly and asks if he got excited about this, thinking it's finally a chance to enter a portal. Simply put, dungeons are fixed places. When entered, both entrance and exit are fixed. Traps and monsters also follow predictable patterns. But portals are dynamic locations. The entrance and exit shift during raids. Sometimes, even the monsters change. Still, the higher the risk, the greater the reward. That's the rule of the player world. And in unknown portals, there's a first-time bonus where he could get a high-level artifact. Kim probably has experience with unknown portals. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for her to obtain an artifact that negates the Black Wolf's debuff. Miso says she'll get in touch once more details are released. They'll probably be talking a lot from now on. She hands over her phone and tells him to type in his number. Hyun looks at her lock screen. Kim apologizes and says she meant to switch the screen for him to type, but her mind is a mess. The protagonist just watches. Back in the present, he thinks it seemed like something was bothering her. But on the other hand, what player doesn't have worries? And he thinks that even if she has a past, she can never talk about it openly. He wonders what will happen if someone finds out he regressed. Shin remembers his former partner and wonders how he's doing now. After all, they were together for years. He kind of wants to at least see his face again. In the VIP room of the Eden Guild, a young man says it's been a while and thought they could talk over coffee or something. He asks if she's just going to stay on her phone waiting for a message. Miso replies that she's talking to Sang. They're preparing to enter a portal together. The guy is surprised and asks if she actually likes him. Kim says it's nothing like that. He says he's the guy with a stun stronger than his own, and he rejected her offer quite decisively too. Miso says he should start worrying about himself. The guy asks why. Kim replies that his swordsmanship was also impressive. The guy laughs and asks if she's not exaggerating a bit, saying that no matter what, comparing the two is kind of a stretch. That guy is also part of the Eden Guild, and his name is Jo Jinho, level 700 S rank. In Jamsil at the training grounds, the protagonist is on the phone with Miso, thanking her for calling. She asks if he has a moment and says she wants to talk about the portal that recently appeared. Shin asks already, says that was fast, and yes, he has time. Kim says she got word about an unknown portal near Chunni Station on Line 7, about 500 meters northwest of it. Looks like all regions up to the mid-checkpoint have been investigated. She just sent him the data on the intersections. Sang tells her to wait while he checks it. Miso says he can take his time, until Hyun widens his eyes upon seeing the portal data and gets excited, because he just got this new skill and wonders who would have thought he'd get a chance to use it so soon. The system notifies the skill Era of Night and Wolves. While the moon is exposed inside the dungeon, users' health recovery and regeneration rate are increased 5-fold. Additionally, regardless of the moon's position, any monsters related to dogs or wolves will be permanently stunned when facing the user wielding the blue stone. The protagonist says he just saw the details and thanks her for the heads up. Kim says she's just sharing news and will call again soon. The guy next to Shin says he can't believe it and asks if that's what he called him here for. Sang apologizes and calls him captain. He says he's joking, that he's a celebrity now and should know it. This is Daekyung. Hyun says he's no celebrity and he's still got a long way to go. The captain asks if that reaction means he hasn't gotten the call yet. The protagonist asks, what call? Daekyung shows his phone and tells him to look for himself. He just made the front page of the Player Gazette. Shin asks, what is this? The captain says he better check his own phone. Sang grabs his phone and thinks it's not like he wanted to be in the news and wonders why they decided to publish it without telling him. Daekyung asks what's wrong and if everyone who knows him is trying to contact him now. Hyun replies he doesn't think it's reached that point yet and says, let's get to the point. The captain picks up a bag and asks if that's what he meant. The protagonist says yes and thanks him. Daekyung says there's no need to thank him. It's not like it's free. Besides, those are just a few of his old artifacts, and asks why he needs them. Wouldn't it be better to buy new ones? Shin says he's just admiring the history and asks if maybe he's continuing the legacy or something. The captain asks if that's his excuse. Sang replies it's just a superstition of his and wonders how he's going to explain that artifacts unused for a long time have better absorption rates. Someone approaches, saying she's late, couldn't find a parking spot, and says, "Let's begin the evaluation." Hyun asks who she is. Daekyung says she's the appraiser who will assist with the deal, and he brought her to ensure a fair agreement for both sides. Magic is cast over the artifacts by the appraiser. The system notifies that artifact appraisal has been completed. The appraiser feels relieved and says she's finished evaluating the artifacts, and she thinks it's fair to proceed with their deal. The captain draws his sword and says that before finalizing the deal, he wants to know if he can take a look at his swordsmanship. The protagonist replies no, saying he's not skilled enough yet to give him advice. Daekyung tells him to stop being modest. After everything they've been through, he's not stupid enough to not realize Shin is way better, and not arrogant enough to avoid asking others for advice. Shin thinks he was hoping not to get involved in something like this. He watches him silently and thinks ignoring someone who's just trying their best is rude, so he tells him to pretend he's not even there and show everything he's got. The captain gets excited. Sang says maybe the lady should stand behind him. The appraiser replies that it's fine, she can handle it. Daekyung says here he goes. He moves his sword swiftly and Hyun thinks it's incredible. He's gotten much stronger since the last dungeon, and it's clear he's been training constantly since then. The protagonist continues watching his swordplay and calls out to him. The captain asks already? Says he still had more to show. Shin asks if there's something wrong with his left arm. Daekyung asks how he knew. Sang replies that whenever he attacks with his right hand, he flexes his left shoulder too quickly. It's like he's being overly cautious. If that's not the case, the captain admits he's right. He has trauma with his left side. Most of his training injuries and even dungeon wounds are all on that side. Even knowing the issue, he can't fix it. Hyun says he absolutely can. Trauma can be overcome. He tells him not to hide his weaknesses, but instead find a way to accept his strengths. From the way he holds his sword to how he breathes, he knows it'll be hard to change everything at first, but it'll be worth it long term, and to try putting a bit more pressure on the sword using that finger. Daekyung says it doesn't seem easy, and it hurts. The protagonist laughs and says to hang in there a bit more. The appraiser blushes. Shin says it hurts, but it's getting better, and it'll only continue to improve. Now he needs to lower it. The appraiser keeps watching them and wonders what the hell is wrong with him. The captain says it's hard. Sang says, just wait. Meanwhile, the appraiser is wondering what the hell she's even witnessing right now. Later, the appraiser goes to check who's in front. Player association report? What do you think when poses for a man to hold and love between players? In another place, a car is moving, and the protagonist is driving it while thinking that it was a good deal, even if it cost him over 400 million won. The benefits he'll gain are worth more than the cost. Although he seems satisfied with the swordsmanship lesson, the evaluator had a strange expression when they finished. Either way, he needs to quickly absorb those artifacts and see what kind of progress he'll make, wondering how he can wait until the next portal appears. That's when Shin widens his eyes after seeing people in front of the car, quickly stops it, and apologizes, asking if they're okay. The guy asks if he finally arrived, says he was tired of waiting, asks what he's doing, and tells him to get out of the car. Sang is confused, and the blonde guy says it's always the idiots who react like that. Hyun widens his eyes as he sees a light. It's the thug releasing magic, and says there's no need to talk, asking if he wants to burn with the car or get out of it. The protagonist thinks he remembers now. These guys are Choi Young-cheol and Cho Seong-ho from the Utopia Guild. Choi targets those weaker than him, and Cho is the lackey who records his videos. Thanks to his extreme content, he had some loyal subscribers who always watched, but after he crossed the line, he got a life sentence and was forgotten. Seong-ho tells his partner to look because this guy isn't even moving. Shin thinks that, in other words, those two are the scum of humanity. Young laughs and asks why this kid is trying to piss him off. Sang thinks it's good he talked about testing progress with the new artifacts, but they're not the kind of opponents he wanted to test against. He gets out of the car and asks what happens now. Choi asks what he thinks and says he'll take as long as needed, telling him to calm down because he's the security here. Lots of people complained about some bastard driving a shitty car around, in other words. Young kicks the car and says they're pissed off at having to look at that piece of junk, asking if he gets it now. Unless he wants to lose the car, he should grab his stuff and leave. People watch, wondering what's happening, and say those bastards are acting tough again and to wait a second. Someone asks if that guy isn't the one who was in the Players' Gazette. They realize it's the one who went on the mission with Kim and try to recall his name. His partner remembers it was Shin. Choi asks if he's strong. Cho says he remembers. That kid went on a mission with Miso, and rumors say he completed a level 100 mission alone. Yang asks alone and says he looks weak. Seong-ho says Kim was with him, and asks if he really thinks she'd let a rookie take all the glory. Then says he already has an idea for the next video title. Choi says he still doesn't believe in his skills. Cho starts recording, saying he's giving Miso's rookie a lesson. Young approaches and says he can spare him. They'll go into training mode and have a duel. If he wins, he'll leave Player City immediately, and if the protagonist wins, they'll stay far away. He asks if it's a deal. The protagonist replies it's a deal. Choi says he's a real man. Furious, Shin says that if they include 500 million and the watch on his wrist, then it's a deal, but if he's scared, he should scram. Young calls him a bastard and his partner calls him. Choi asks what it is and says, can't he see he's busy? Cho tells him to look at this. Chad is talking about the 500 million. Sang asks if he's in or scared and thinks that if they keep this up, the video won't be monetized due to violence and adult content, so we might as well use this as stress relief. In Player City, building C Plaza, people ask what's going on since they're just doing the usual. Hyun stands up with his sword and the system notifies that training mode has been activated and players received a barrier effect. Choi says just like he said, 500 million and the watch are on the line, and not to worry, he keeps his word. Just don't come begging later. More notifications confirm training mode fully activated and for players to proceed with combat training. A voice says training mode is active. The protagonist sighs. Yang releases his flames and asks if he saw that. They're starting now, and he's not playing around. Someone calls out and Shin leaps, saying he's not playing around either and won't forgive him, even if he begs. The fight is on TV and Kim realizes it's her partner, asking what the hell is going on. Then she looks closely and wonders if that's Choi from the Utopia Guild, thinking he's a B-rank player, and heard rumors he does whatever he wants because his uncle is the guild master. Someone approaches and asks what's wrong and why the serious look. This girl is also from the Eden Guild. Terry, level 700 and S rank. She looks at the TV and asks if that guy isn't the one her sister keeps trying to recruit. Miso replies yes, his name is Hyun, and she's trying to figure out why he's on some random idiot's livestream. Terry says his movements look pretty good. Meanwhile, in the fight, Yang curses and calls him a cheating bastard after the protagonist attacks him. Choi, with a fireball in hand, says he knows he's a liar and calls him a damn bastard. Yang attacks. Shin lifts his sword to block and Choi is confused as he sees him cut the fireball in half. A big explosion happens. Cho, recording, asks who the hell this kid is. The chat wonders how he did that. Sang says finally and thinks that for the first time since his regression, his body is moving how he wants. He remembers 3 hours ago when he said it was thanks to the evaluator. The deal ended quickly. The evaluator says, what the heck? They did all the work. The captain laughs and says they should go out for drinks one day. He's got the money, so just pick a place and it's on him. Hyun apologizes and says he has to go somewhere urgently. Dek asks if it's serious and if it's because he asked too much, saying he can take it all back. The protagonist says he just had plans to go somewhere else and asks to be forgiven. The captain says if that's the case, he and the evaluator can still go. She tells him to wait. She forgot she has an important event today. Shin thinks that's more exciting than booze. The evaluator runs off, saying, see you later. Somewhere empty, Sang sits on a bench, sighs, and begins absorbing the equipment. The system notifies that the bronze equipment's absorption rate is 10%, and the time of use will raise it to 90%. Shin asks about the 90%. The goddess of luck says it's only thanks to her that he gets these blessings. Sang says in most cases he'd only get a tenth of the original attributes. Usage makes a big difference. He says there's something he wants to ask, if she's a popular constellation and if she's heard of one called the Late Exemplary Student. The goddess complains he should focus on her and scolds him for paying attention to others. Hyun says it's just that this constellation is important to him, but he totally understands if she's upset. The goddess gives him permission to raise his head and says she's feeling generous. She'll look up info on that constellation. The protagonist gets excited and asks if it's real, thanking her. He releases magic around the ring and asks how about enjoying a good meal. The system notifies that mana synchronization of 5 artifacts has begun. A banquet is summoned to the table. The 5 favorite dishes of men. Shin looks excited, his mouth watering, thinking that even though the artifacts were used by an older guy, who would have guessed the food would still suit someone younger. All these artifacts have a 90% absorption rate, and he wonders how strong he'll be after cleaning his plate. He can't even imagine. Back in real time, during the fight, more notifications say the confrontation title was activated. No one is within 5 meters of the target except him, so the confrontation effects are active. The system shows the player's info. The chat asks if Choi is trembling and tells him to bring the heat. Sang stares, and Yang, with his flames, gets up and charges at him, calling him a bastard. Kim yells for him to be careful, but her sister says not to worry. He'll probably dodge. Hyun dodges the flames and says he hopes he didn't forget. The protagonist gets close and brings up the 500 million and the watch. Cho thinks it's perfect. He fell for it. Shin's foot gets caught in ice. Choi smirks and flips the bird, saying victory is his and calling him an idiot. The system notifies that the conditions have been met. Forced freeze ability applied to the player. Sang looks at the ice around him, and Terry asks if he could always use magic besides pyromancy, saying this might work. Kim says to listen carefully to what she's about to say. Hyun is a player who can remove negative status effects, and she wants them to see up close why she recruited him into the organization. Then she looks at the TV and can only see ice. Choi watches and asks what the hell that was and where that bastard went, thinking the skill definitely activated. Unless he has status removal, that should have worked. He wonders if this bastard is really a rookie. The protagonist appears behind him, jumping over his head and landing a full hit, slamming him to the ground. Shin is confused that he didn't get cut and says he thinks training mode saved him. The system notifies that training mode minimized any fatal damage. Cho calls out for his partner, and chat users are impressed with Sang, thinking he can remove status effects. And that's not even the craziest part, and asking if he looks different than before. Seongcho thinks now that they mention it, this bastard has a completely different aura than before, wondering what the hell he did. Terry says it's a type of awakening ability. Miso asks about an awakening ability, and her sister confirms, saying that judging by his look, it might be transcendence or psychedelic, but with those black eyes, it seems more like psychedelic. She remembers this type causes extreme fatigue when the user takes damage and asks if he's saying he can defeat someone without getting hit. Kim responds that that can't be true. He never used a skill like that one with her, and asks if she understands the value of such an ability. Terry says there are two possibilities. Either he had no reason to use it with her around. Miso asks about the second one. Terry stays silent for a moment, then says it's that he might have a way to obtain rare skills like that in a short time. The evaluator looks at a document and says this is bad. Asks if the artifact Shin bought had to be tested due to a hidden skill. She realizes the hidden skill is psychedelic and asks if he could really get a hidden skill with such a low chance, and says he'd have to be blessed by the goddess of luck or something. The system notifies about psychedelic. When the skill is used, it restores all XP and enters an awakened state for the next 100 seconds. During this time, the user's physical and mental capabilities explode past their limits, with enhanced motor, cognitive, and decision-making abilities. Once the effect ends, the user enters extreme fatigue based on the damage taken, lasting 10 minutes. Meanwhile, in the fight, the protagonist asks about the bet or if they're going to exit training mode and try again. Choi insults him, thinking he let his guard down because he thought he was a rookie, wondering who would have imagined he'd be so strong. Young moves quickly, stands up, and thinks he needs to fight seriously now. First, he'll put some distance, wonders if this even makes sense, and realizes this is nothing like what Cho said. He'd never have started this fight if he knew he was this strong. That bastard made it all up. Shin pushes his head and says it's time to end it. Now comes the finishing blow, and tells him not to worry so much. Training mode prevents fatal damage. Choi says, wait, he wins. He'll send the 500 million to his account. Sang says now that the bet's over, it's time for revenge. Yeon asks what the hell kind of revenge. Hyun says all of this started because of him. 3 days ago at the dealership, the mechanic said they fixed the car but that it'd have to be replaced soon. The protagonist asks about replacing it. The mechanic says, yes, it won't last long, it's too old. Shin says that's impossible. The mechanic says he's sure he loves it, but it's time to say goodbye, and he's grateful to be its owner. Sang's eyes fill with tears. He thinks all that time, every time he took it for a ride, it was happy and tells it not to forget to be happy. In the present, Hyun says this is revenge for his shitty car and calls him a little punk. Choi says wait, he's really sorry. People around are outraged at what they're seeing. The protagonist's hand glows with energy, sounds are heard. It's Yong doing his business. The chat comments this can't be real. Choi apologizes. People start asking if it's just them or if it smells like shit. Everyone agrees, and ask what the hell he ate. Cho, uncomfortable, wonders what to do now. He doesn't care about the MeTube channel anymore. Thinks they messed with the wrong person. Someone approaches, calling out, it's Utopia Guild's regional manager of Kangong, Moon Bokyun, who says it looks like he caused quite the mess. Seong says he's really sorry. The manager thinks this is an interesting situation. He heard he awakened recently and still managed to defeat Choi, who's experienced. He calls Shin, says he's here to resolve things and handle compensation, and asks if he has any time now. Shin asks if he can state his name and who he works for. Moon wonders what's with that arrogant attitude, then thinks maybe it's not arrogance but confidence. He already has experience beyond his level and his skills aren't a joke. Beck introduces himself as regional manager of Utopia Guild, Kangdong Division, and thinks he needs to do whatever it takes to recruit him. He says Utopia Guild will take care of any damages and thinks he can cover most of them if he keeps building a good relationship with him. Sang shows his phone with his bank app and says, it's fine, 2 billion won should cover it. He was going to ask for 500 million, but it didn't seem enough. Moon reacts to the 2 billion and asks if they can pay in installments. Elsewhere, a voice says it must be Hyun. It's reporters asking if he made a deal with Utopia Guild, if he's still talking to Kim, and if he's sure he has no ties with Eden Guild. The protagonist asks if they're serious and what they're doing there. He has nothing to say and tells them to go away. The reporters ask if he's coming back from training, say the public has a right to know, ask him to stop avoiding and tell the truth, and if he's in a relationship with Miso. Shin says, damn rights, asks if his personal life is part of that and thinks he already has too much to worry about, like he has time for romance. Better forget it. He says it's time to get ready, can't believe the rage he suggested is today. Because of that, he was busy last week, but with all his progress, it should be fine. He checks the stat menu and asks if Demon Strike leveled up. With title effects, it's now unlimited. Should last around 2.6 seconds, and with delay effects, over 5 seconds. The system shows Demon Strike stuns a target, monster or human, for 2.4 seconds. Stun success and duration depend on the target's resistance level. Blade adaptability, excluding daggers and one-handed swords, is extremely high. Sang says he's not done yet and will check the results of his efforts. More notifications say blade adaptability, excluding daggers and one-handed swords, is extremely high. It concentrates a great amount of energy and releases it at once, charging at the target ahead. Damage and range increase drastically with charge time, but movement is fully restricted. Hyun says this should be enough for this raid and thinks a lot was missing in the last battle. He couldn't act like he used to. During the werewolf fight, he had to gamble due to his limited combat patterns. And during the Choi fight, it was easy to get stuck without a movement skill. If those guys had been just a bit stronger, he might have died. He needs to focus. If this continues, no matter how much progress he makes, he'll just repeat the same path. The second invasion happens in 2040. He needs to make sure the future changes. He can't lose everything again like last time. In this life, he must become stronger, just like the one who saved him before. Then his phone rings. He answers. It's reporter Park calling about the interview they scheduled for today. He hopes he's still available. Shin thinks he's screwed, says, of course, and asks if it's happening soon. John says yes, they can meet at the cafe and talk there. Sang thinks he completely forgot. The raid is at 7 p.m. and the interview is at 2. Now it's 1:45 p.m. When Hyun opens the door, some reporters are already waiting outside, telling him to tell them everything about him and Miso. The protagonist, radiating a terrifying aura, tells everyone to get out of the way. The system notifies that the psychedelic skill has been activated. The user's physical body has been enhanced, and their speed will increase drastically. Meanwhile, Park is waiting at the cafe and hears voices. Noticing his interviewee has arrived, he says he already ordered a coffee so Hyun can come closer and sit down, also commenting that he looks interesting. Shin thanks him and John asks if he was in a dungeon. Sang replies, no way, and thinks getting there was harder than clearing a dungeon. He sits and apologizes for the delay. The reporter laughs and says it's no problem. He'd like to interview him about the recent events in the mission area, and it seems like he went through a lot. Hyun says it's nothing, just a few things, that's all. Park replies that regardless of what he thinks, he's the center of attention for all players. Even though people say level and experience no longer matter with the new classification system, due to his sudden appearance and low level, they're calling him a super rookie. The protagonist says it's not like that. Jian asks if he's aware that several guilds are interested in recruiting him. Shin thinks he's been getting a lot of cold calls and guesses Park wants to talk about the Eden Guild, asking if it's about the others. The reporter says no, he's talking about foreign guilds. It's news even to him, but apparently 5 foreign guilds submitted official requests this morning to the Korean Player Association for identity verification. Most foreign guilds are known for recruiting players in early stages to gain an edge, but it's probably the first time they've shown interest in a rookie like him. Either way, he suggests Hyun not let his guard down. Many eyes are watching him. At Chunui Station, in the alleys, a portal appears. Sang walks and thinks he had hoped to start a one-man guild. If it's a foreign guild, it makes him wonder if they're really on another level. He wonders how much he had to suffer in the past. It's hard to believe this is happening. Then someone calls him. It's Kim, saying it's been a while and calling him over, adding there's still time before the portal appears. Hyun is confused to see a girl behind her and thinks that woman is... They remain silent for a moment until Miso says her sister kept saying she wanted to meet him, so she brought her along before they entered the portal. Her name is Terry, also from the Eden Guild. She suggests they go to a nearby cafe. They shake hands. Terry says it's a pleasure to meet him. The protagonist introduces himself and says likewise, thinking he'd recognize her even without the introduction. There isn't a player in the country who doesn't know her. Also known by her nickname, the Shadow Eliminator. She's one of Korea's top players and her popularity reaches other countries too. She's one of the reasons Eden Guild has its current influence. Her existence alone can shift guild rankings. Seems like he got lucky meeting rankers after his regression. Terry asks if she can request a favor. Shin thinks that came out of nowhere but replies yes and asks how he can help. The Shadow Eliminator says it's nothing major, just wondering if they could spar. Kim asks what kind of favor is that for someone she just met. Terry says she told her on the way here and remembers saying she'd see if he was worthy. Miso says that doesn't count and apologizes, saying her sister enjoys challenging others for fun. Sang says he honestly doesn't mind, draws his sword, and tells her to get straight to the point, saying that one of the nation's best players is giving him the chance to fight her. The Shadow Eliminator says it's an honor to receive that chance. She knew her sister had a good eye for people and apologizes for her lack of professionalism. She summons her weapon and suggests they exchange 5 blows, telling him to say when he's ready. Hyun thinks he's no match for her but must seize this opportunity. It's a chance to see how much he's grown and what he still needs to work on. But seriously, she just summoned her weapon and her entire aura changed. He needs to stop wasting time and says he's ready. The psychedelic skill activates and the protagonist decides to go all in right away. Kim wonders what's happening. She can't keep up at all. Terry says she'll make the first move. She moves so fast it's impossible to see clearly. Only the pressure in the air intensifies. Shin is confused and moves, thinking he's an idiot with his current physical abilities and can't rely on reaction time alone to anticipate attacks. Sang blocks, thinking he needs to predict everything. The Shadow Eliminator smiles, pulls back, and says his movements are impressive. Maybe she should try a bit harder. There are still 4 strikes left. She moves extremely fast. Hyun thinks she's a monster and she's getting even faster. Just like last time, he'll have to ignore vision and rely on instinct. But this time, it's much harder. He closes his eyes. Kim doesn't understand, asks if he's seriously closing his eyes despite the huge difference between him and her sister, calling it completely stupid. The protagonist, eyes shut, dodges her attack. Terry says his concentration is incredible. Didn't expect him to block the second strike. Most swordsmen couldn't reach this level of focus since it requires a lot of experience. Shin wonders if she knows. The Shadow Eliminator says it's almost like fighting a veteran. Sang says he's speechless. Terry says 3 left. Hyun asks if he can request a favor too. She replies, of course. The protagonist thanks her and suggests they skip the remaining strikes and go all out. Terry asks what he just said. Shin admits he's being arrogant but feels like he won't get another chance like this. One last strike. He was being honest. If he doesn't see her full power in person, it'll haunt him during training. Miso tells her not to listen. The Eliminator says it's fine. Though she can't go 100%, she'll show him her max speed. Skills are harder to control. Sang says that's more than enough. Just being able to follow her max speed is already a win. He imagines it's a real battle. If he hesitates, he'll die. Terry says here she comes. Hyun takes a stance thinking there's no time to prepare. He must already be ready. Instead of swinging blindly, he'll attack the space. Before she reaches him, he swings his sword toward her, about to land a hit, but the Shadow Eliminator swiftly dodges using a shadow skill. The protagonist is confused, then gets hit in the face. Terry asks if he's okay. Shin says yes, he's fine, thinking he didn't expect her to use a skill. He complains about his head hurting. The Shadow Eliminator watches and apologizes, saying she didn't mean to use a skill on him, asks if he's okay. She offers her hand to help him up. Sang says he'll be fine. Actually, he wants to thank her for taking it seriously. Terry laughs and says the pleasure was hers, but next time they should talk seriously. Hyun laughs and says anytime. The Shadow Eliminator asks if he means it. Says she'll call him later then. Kim observes them and says it's almost time for the raid to begin. Anyway, she better write a report on everything that happened today. Terry apologizes and walks away, saying good luck on the raid and to call when it's over. Miso tells him to be careful on the way back. The protagonist thinks, like it or not, this was his first loss since regressing, and he wouldn't have stood a chance if she fought seriously from the start. Even though it was unexpected, now he has a new goal to overcome. The Shadow Eliminator looks to the side and smiles. Shin wonders if it's something like, you can try all you want. Chunui Station, unidentified portal. Kim asks how about they start by introducing themselves. These are the people on the team. The two greet him, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. Sang introduces himself, saying it's an honor to stand before such great players. One player tells him not to worry, they came to meet the Wonder Kid all over the news. His name is Park Taeseok, a mage player specialized in the ignition skill. Hyun asks if by ignition he means pyromancy. The player confirms it's the same type of magic that Choi used before, but he spent most of his time refining flames, so his should be much stronger. The mage releases extremely intense energy from his hands, saying he's still at the blue flame stage. The protagonist says no, he seems really reliable, and thinks he made the right call. Until reaching a certain level, focusing on just one thing is the best way. The reason Choi was so easy to defeat was because, instead of specializing, he spread himself thin learning too many skills. Kim says there's also her. This is Kang Joo-hee, a spatial wielder and a mage player specialized in the martial connection skill. The player agrees and says that what Kim said is correct. Kong says that since her partner showed his powers, they say to wait, but Juhee continues anyway, releasing an intense pressure in the area. Miso tells her not to do that. The mage apologizes, and Shin wonders what kind of win this is, thinking it's completely different from what a spatial wielder should be able to do. A large circle opens and Kong says that this is her skill and it's a pleasure to meet him. Sang says he hopes they all do their best and thinks he knew he could count on her. She was the final piece in the perfect team combo. Himself as a close-range swordsman, Kim at long range, Park covering openings, and Juhee helping them escape when necessary. Aside from lacking a healer, it's the perfect team. Most importantly, their chemistry is amazing. It's clear this isn't their first time working together. These things matter, especially when it comes to survival. Back then too. He smiles and Kim approaches, asking if he's okay and if he got hurt fighting her sister. Hyun replies that he's fine, he was just thinking about something and decides to worry about it later, suggesting they go in already, thinking that instead of the past, he'll focus on the present. Inside the unidentified portal, frozen hell. They walk and the protagonist thanks Taeseok, saying that without his buff, they'd already be popsicles. The flame blessing skill. Those blessed have increased resistance to cold. Miso says she knows. The weather wasn't like this last time. She also asks if it looks like he has another weapon besides the sword and why he didn't use it before. Shin answers that he had a feeling he'd need it if the battles required more mobility. Kim is impressed and asks if that means he's good with a variety of weapons. Sang replies that he worked hard for that and thinks it's hard to make excuses now. Kim calls her partner and they come across a huge monster. Miso says Plan C and tells them to go. Kong releases her magic and replies that she understood. The monster roars and attacks everything around it, causing a huge impact. They approach and Kim, with her bow ready, says she's awaiting Hyun's orders. He tells her to cover the rear. The monster looks to the side. Hyun is approaching. Miso signals her partner and Taeseok replies he's ready. Both attack. Then Shin moves and also attacks, slashing the monster with his sword and calls out to Kong. She activates her magic and says, "Here I go." The beast lunges towards Sang, hits him hard, and only the sword remains stuck in the ground. The monster grins excitedly. Hyun appears behind it and asks, "What's wrong? Thought you got me." He closes in and Taeseok tells his partner to get ready to strike again. Juhee responds, "On it!" The protagonist uses his demon strike skill, smiling as the opponent becomes paralyzed and decapitates it. The two mages are confused. The monster's head drops to the ground. They ask what that was. They didn't think that single hit would be enough to take it out. Shin says he gets it now and apologizes. They tell him no need to apologize. Kim asks if he didn't tell them, says she reacted the same when she first saw it, and she's sure he hasn't shown them everything yet. Sang thinks the way she said that makes him want to reveal all his cards. Either way, even though this is the first raid, their teamwork is solid. He wonders if this is the skill level of experienced players and thinks he has a good feeling about it, suggesting they move to round 2. But more giants approach. Later, still in the same area, they are all eliminated. Park says Hyun is incredible. The best swordsman he's ever worked with. Hyun thanks him. Kim laughs and says, "Thanks for making him happy." Tae hardly ever gets to use his full potential, and he's glad he could thanks to Hyun. The protagonist thinks he understands. It's probably like that for most mages. Without a reliable swordsman, they have no choice but to use support skills. But honestly, this feels like overkill. Miso asks what that skill was. She says seriously she should be used to it by now, but he always manages to surprise her. She remembers earlier when a huge impact shook the area. They exchange blows until Kim notices something to the side and shouts that a demon-armored ogre is approaching from the front. Shin asks what they should do, says this is bad. Miso agrees, says they need to focus their firepower on it. First, they should create as much distance as possible. Sang asks if they can open a portal that will throw him right in front of it. Kim says that monster specializes in defense. Even she's unsure just by watching, and wonders if he's prepping something. In that case, she figures it won't hurt to trust him, and tells her partner to do as he said. Juhee says the portal is open. Hyun moves fast, using the full charge skill, concentrates a large amount of energy and releases it at once, charging at the target ahead. Damage and range increase drastically with charge time, but all movement is restricted during the charge. The protagonist runs into the circle, clashes head-on with the opponent, and slices it in half. The players look stunned and ask if that was real. In real time, Miso says she's never seen such a powerful movement skill before. Since the team is so reliable, she figured he could use it more aggressively. Kong tells everyone to be quiet. She thinks they've arrived. They see the beast with a powerful aura, ask if it's sleeping. It's the mid-boss, Cerberus of the Frozen Hell. They say it's a relief and they better plan their next move. Juhee says they don't have much intel left, asks if she should open a portal early or maybe start a firestorm. Shin thinks the time has come. He's found his punching bag. The system notifies Era of Night and Wolves. While the moon is visible inside the dungeon, the user's HP recovery and regeneration rate are multiplied by 5. Kim says that's why she thinks they should go with Plan F. She looks at Sang and gets confused seeing him smiling, realizing he's making that face again. Park asks if he had a plan. Hyun says yes, and thinks everyone's probably staring at him. They say they get that, but could he explain? The protagonist thinks there's no time to explain everything. For Era of Night and Wolves to activate, the moon must be fully visible. If even a single cloud covers part of it, the effect is cut in half. He feels bad for his teammates. He jumps and the mid-boss opens its eyes. Shin thinks that asking forgiveness is faster than asking permission. And now that he sees it up close, it's not that cute. Miso says they should prepare to support him from a distance. Kong says to wait, asks if it seems strange. Cerberus doesn't even seem to be reacting. Kim says it does seem that way, wonders if it's being cautious, but thinks no. Last time it attacked as soon as it saw them during the research phase. Cerberus stands. Tae says it moved. Juhi says she thinks she misunderstood everything. They need to help. Miso looks closely and thinks it doesn't seem like it's going to attack. That thing is obeying him. The system notifies Cerberus of the frozen hell recognizes you as a being of higher level. Cerberus will enter full obedience mode. Sang is stunned and asks who would have thought it'd be that easy. Later, still there, more notifications arrive congratulating him for defeating the mid-boss, Cerberus of the frozen hell. Hyun says it felt wrong to eliminate something so obedient. The system notifies he earned the rank C title. Reduction. Description. Select one skill. Its cooldown will be halved. The protagonist says that would go perfectly with recovery. The system displays recovery, removes all negative status effects currently affecting the user. Kim tells him to wait. Shin asks if something's wrong, then a glowing stone appears nearby, and he thinks that now that he reflects on it, he's never told anyone about his ability. Since he was always alone, the idea of explaining it never crossed his mind. He wonders if she's going to ask for the artifact and hopes she doesn't want it. Miso says that since he defeated Cerberus solo, he can take the artifact. Sang feels relieved and thanks her, asks if she talked it over with the others. Miso asks, talked? Says as he can see they don't care, and asks if that's okay with him. Hyun thanks her and thinks he'll need to find a way to use his abilities without anyone noticing. Kim says now they should move on and let him do his thing. The protagonist asks what she means by his thing. Miso asks if every time he gets an artifact, he doesn't do something with it. Shin asks if she knew. Kim says yes. Actually, she found out a long time ago, right after they finished that mission, when she was about to leave and wondered what he'd do alone. She looked back and that's when she discovered his secret. Sang thinks that a player's unique skill is like their heart. He calls out and starts to talk about his ability, but Miso interrupts him and says he's one of those players who performs a ritual. Players like that have appeared from time to time. That's why he doesn't need to worry and can go ahead. If she were in his place, she'd also want to hide a secret like that. The players leave and Hyun thinks there's clearly been a huge misunderstanding, but it's better than having his secret exposed. For now, he'll just swallow it down. Ice Heart is a gold-ranked artifact. They say this heart houses the extreme cold that mimics the cruelty of winter, ready to freeze the world. Later, they continue walking. Kong releases her energy and says, that's the last one. Kim says she did a great job and it's all thanks to her. The protagonist agrees and says it was all thanks to her. Juhi calls him and asks if he's sure it's okay, saying even after stacking all the ogre corpses they defeated, will the boss really show up to eat them? Shin tells her not to worry, the boss there would do anything for food. Kong asks how he knows that. Sang hesitates to answer. Then suddenly, he orders his partner to fire it up, and Miso points out that he didn't answer the question. Smoke rises, and they sit on high ground waiting. Park says it's been 20 minutes. Hyun replies the boss should appear any second now. Then they hear a loud noise. The monster appears. The protagonist tells them to get ready. The final boss is a huge, freezing brown bear. Kim watches and thinks it's true they've been successful in raids so far thanks to Shin. But as Sang faces the boss, Miso wonders if this situation isn't too dangerous. Plasma drips from Hyun's mouth. He says he's about to die. A few minutes earlier, Kim asked what he meant. The protagonist replied that he thought he was clear. Miso asks what he means by using himself as bait. Shin answers that he has no choice. This is the fastest and safest way for the team to complete the raid. Most giant monsters have a similar trait that activates when their HP drops to a certain point. They enter the well-known gluttony state. A monster in gluttony becomes stronger and significantly more violent. This one starts devouring everything around it. That's why they brought the ogre corpses. And what if they put something in the food? That's why, while Kong was stacking the bodies with portals, they gathered juniper wood, a strong sedative. Park says the only problem is lowering the HP enough to trigger gluttony. Shin says he'll create a favorable situation for them to deal damage. That's his job, and asks them to trust him just this once. In real time, Sang dodges the attacks and thinks this was a shitty plan. He's literally one step away from dying and wonders if he hasn't grown enough. He thought he could endure attacks at this level by now. Hyun blocks with his sword and questions why this monster is so stupidly strong, if his strength stat still isn't high enough, and thinks he might really die. If this continues, he'll have to dodge everything. An explosion happens. The protagonist jumps and tries to attack, but the bear dodges. Shin thinks its reflexes are too fast and wonders if jumping was a bad move. The monster opens its massive mouth. Arrows come flying in, hitting hard. Sang glances sideways. Kim, standing on a rock, tells her partner to go now. Hyun smiles and says he's alive thanks to her. The bear widens its eyes. The protagonist moves his sword and slashes it. Then he strikes the ground with his blade, releasing ice. The system notifies that the great freezing brown bear was frozen for 1 second due to the effect of full charge. Shin says it worked, thinking the freeze from Ice Heart activated. He wasn't sure because of the monster's resistance, but it really worked. Sang gets close again and hits it with his sword. The bear roars and Hyun uses Demon Strike. Miso calls out to him and the protagonist says he knows. Park releases his magic and says he'll send in a big one, telling his partner to dodge. Shin looks surprised as Tae uses his skill. Blue Flame Flamingo releasing a powerful attack. The monster collapses. Sang thinks that firepower exceeded expectations. With that, they must have reduced its HP enough. Plasma starts leaking from the bear's eye. Its energy is changing. Plasma also comes out of its mouth. Hyun smiles and says they did it. The damage was enough. The system notifies that the great freezing brown bear has entered the gluttony state. The protagonist says, as planned, it's in gluttony now. Miso calls out. The bear begins to destroy everything around it. It rises, looking even more terrifying. Shin watches and wonders if gluttony always makes monsters this monstrous, and thinks now it's Kang's turn. Park asks if this is gluttony state. Kim calls out to her two partners. Tae says he thinks she's still getting ready. Kang continues releasing her power, then widens her eyes. Miso asks if she'll make it in time. Park says they shouldn't worry about that now. What matters is whether their partner survives or not. Meanwhile, Sang attacks the beast, wondering if she's still not ready. He tells himself to forget about failing the raid. This is a life or death risk. Then he looks scared as the monster gets closer. Hyun stops and thinks he can't dodge this one, so he'll take it head on. He activates the psychedelic skill. Juhi continues channeling her magic with plasma coming from her nose, saying the teleport prep is complete. The bear opens its mouth, approaching the protagonist. Then Kang uses her magic to get close but feels unwell. Her teammates ask if she's okay. Juhi replies that she is. She just used too much mana. Shin thinks that was dangerous. If the attack hadn't landed, he could have been devoured. The system notifies that the great freezing brown bear was heavily sedated by the effect of suspicious juniper of Snowy Mountain. Sang smiles and says it's fine. They made it. The bear emits a sound while plasma flows all over its body and more notifications arrive, congratulating him for defeating the final boss. The monster collapses and the unidentified portal is cleared. Kim thanks everyone. Hyun says it's okay, it was her idea. The system notifies that as a reward for clearing the portal, his level increased substantially. The protagonist thinks this dungeon went a bit overboard. Kang exits the portal and says, "Good work." Miso says the same. Shin tells her not to look like that and thanks her for agreeing to his last-minute dumb plan. Juhi says she thinks it was a great chance to understand her abilities' limits. Sang laughs and says he hopes they get another chance to work together again, thinking he's really grateful to all of them. They listen to every crazy request, but he won't lie, he would have forced it if they hadn't joined. The raids he used to do always ended in tragedy. Most portals with good rewards had a 90% survival rate. Since teams were made up of experienced players, the success rate was high. But those 10% always ended up finding him. He can only assume it's luck that it didn't end that way this time. A hero's work is always done at the edge. Even though getting stronger is important, if he had to set another goal for this life, it'd be to avoid any unnecessary deaths. Hyun calls everyone to check the reward. The system notifies that the portal's final reward, the first clear bonus, has appeared. The protagonist thinks this is it, the first clear bonus. More notifications say that once they get close, each person will receive an appropriate reward. Shin extends his hand. The goddess of luck touches it, insisting he watch as she reveals the truth behind her powers. Sang wonders about the truth of her powers and thinks that if she's this confident, he's excited to see what awaits. The system notifies that he'll receive a unique artifact and can choose one from the list. Hyun gets excited upon seeing a bunch of unique artifacts. He had a feeling but the weight of a unique rank is on a whole different level. He smiles brightly and more notifications appear thanks to the authority of the Goddess of Luck. A hidden effect exclusive to unique rank artifacts and above has been unlocked. The protagonist remembers he forgot. That was one of the contract's conditions. The Goddess of Luck wants him to thank her sincerely for her efforts. Shin glances to the side and sees the others are busy checking their rewards. He wonders if it's time to choose his artifact and thinks he doesn't even need to think twice. He chooses, and the artifact begins to materialize. Sang had already decided it's the Great Sword of Fighting Spirit. This great sword represents the fighting spirit of all great warriors. It holds not only immense strength, but also the blessings of the wind. Thanks to the blessings of the god of fighting spirit, the aura created by the blade grants the user a 10% recovery rate. Hyun thinks he knew it. It has some crazy attributes worthy of a unique artifact. He grabs the sword and thinks, "Take good care of me from now on." The artifact falls to the ground because the protagonist can't hold it, and he asks why it's so heavy. The system displays information about weight. Due to the effects of the skill Devour Artifacts, all skills no longer consume mana. As a penalty, the lightness effects have been halved. All equipped artifacts will weigh 100 kilograms. Shin, confused, asks if this is some kind of scam. Kim asks if something's wrong. Sang replies it's nothing and calls out to everyone, saying it looks like they got great rewards. Miso answers yes, everyone received good artifacts for their classes. Hyun says, "Come on, he didn't do anything." Kim repeats that, but they can't deny the fact that it was really thanks to him. That's why they had a little talk and think it's only fair to give him the boss's corpse and the magic stones, asking what he thinks. The protagonist looks surprised and says there's no need for that. Kong says no, they should settle it now. That's the conclusion they came to after calculating everything. The protagonist says he understands and thinks, who would have imagined his teammates would be so generous? The boss's corpse alone must be worth around 60 million. Adding everything up, it's about 150 million. He can't believe it. But he can't laugh yet, he needs to hold it in. At Chunui Station Portal, Frozen Hell, Main Street, Kim says that's right and thinks they have no choice. Shin agrees and says they can celebrate another time, thinking he wants to use this opportunity to check the total value of everything. Miso says they'll see him again soon. Sang thanks them for everything. She looks at him and asks if it's okay to call him anytime she wants. Hyun wonders who she thinks she is and thinks that's what he wants to say, but can't, and replies that of course it's fine. Kim smiles and says, "See you later." The protagonist widens his eyes and tells her to return safely, thinking he never imagined he'd see her make that kind of face. Juhee and Tae feel like third wheels at the Chunui Station portal. In an alley, Shin is sitting on the ground releasing mana, and the system notifies that the fated greatsword has been absorbed. Lightness condition met, effect reactivated. Sang says, as expected, he didn't gain much, since the sword had no bonus attributes. Now that that's settled, it's time to check what he's gotten so far. The system shows player info, status menu, and a hidden skill. Explosive Knockback. Consumes 27 mana to push an opponent back. Knockback success rate and distance depend on opponent resistance. Can use up to 183 mana to boost success and knockback range. And Smart Hunter. Restores 1 stamina every time a small or larger monster is defeated. Hyun smiles while reading and wonders if just swapping one sword boosted his strength stat that much. He also got 2 new titles and a new skill, and wants to increase his luck even more. More notifications say luck surpassed 200. Critical hit damage has been adjusted. Current critical damage, 120%, 600%. The protagonist says 600% max critical damage and thinks he reached this point way faster than in his past life, and says he'll keep going at this pace. And to wait for him, Phantom Blade of Gyeongsoa. The system notifies the atmosphere around him is gradually turning unsettling. Shin says he'll also get revenge on Terry next time, until he notices something and looks to the side. More notifications arrive. New constellations seek presence. The Lion King shows great interest in swordsmanship. The man with the beautiful beard praises his fighting spirit. The Shadow Huntress questions the presence of someone like him in this world. And the Goddess of Luck says these candidates aren't bad. His value just skyrocketed. The constellations appear before him. Sang thinks he didn't expect constellations to show up again so soon, likely due to his absurd growth rate. The biggest reason is probably the sociability of the Goddess of Luck. Stop acting like you can read my mind. Let's check who showed up this time. The Lion King and the man with the beautiful beard. Everyone knows these two. They were real-life heroes who became constellations. Still, they make him uncomfortable. The system notifies the Lion King scolds him for staring at his superiors. The man with the beautiful beard yells, if he were still a general, he'd have been executed. Hyun apologizes, thinking this is exactly why he hates hero-type constellations. But the Shadow Huntress is even more dangerous. She's the last constellation he wanted to meet in this life. a bounty hunter who constantly checks the system for updates. She roams around looking for players who received extreme benefits due to system errors or violated serious rules. Cases like that existed in his past life. Unlike rare types like the Goddess of Luck, she relentlessly hunted high-level players with dual contracts. Some were even broken or ruined. Honestly, it was terrifying. He doesn't like any of these constellations. Of course, forming a contract with one is a big deal. It can completely change a player's future, so the choice really matters. But for now, the Goddess of Luck is enough. Still, he wonders, shouldn't he want something even bigger now? Only a few players in history have ever formed contracts with one. They're literally mythical beings. He may not like gambling, but right now he has no choice. And he apologizes, but won't choose anyone today. The Lion King is stunned, says he's never been treated like this. The man with the beautiful beard says he'll consider returning because he sees him as a brother. The protagonist thinks no matter how many times he comes, his answer won't change. Shin stares at the Shadow Huntress. She watches him and warns that she will uncover his secrets one day. Sang feels uneasy and says this is bad, thinking that even if he doesn't want to deal with any of this, there's nothing he can do. He checks his phone and says that either way, it must be time. Hyun sees it's 11:25 and says perfect. He can still make it if he leaves now. He thinks the monsters in the next portal will be kobold packs. Just like wolves, they're in the canine family. There's no way he's missing this opportunity. Doing 3 raids a day won't be easy, but let's go until even mythical constellations start showing interest in him. Near Jamsil Station, Mission Area B4 Player Association, Portal Management Agency, a secretary says on the phone, "Yes, this is the dimensional agency of the Korean Player Association." The call is connected. Then she looks up shocked and says this can't be. A portal has opened at Exit 1 of Bupyeong Station. All available combatants must act immediately. The situation is confirmed. They will also request additional help from players. A voice says someone is already fighting there. The secretary, shocked and worried, asks what they just said. The woman replies, "She said there's already a player there." The secretary asks how he got there. The woman answers she doesn't know either, but he's fighting the monsters alone. The secretary asks, "Alone?" and says that's far too dangerous. They need to evacuate immediately. The woman replies that she understands, but he doesn't seem to be in danger. The space between realities, created 11 years ago after the first rupture, unlike dungeons and portals, is an unpredictable disaster that allows monsters to enter the world. The portal is summoned and monsters come out of it, confused when they see the protagonist there, and he says it's not unpredictable for him. 10 minutes earlier, Shin thinks it's about time, and as he remembers, right after passing that exit, he looks to the side and notices something shining, saying he found it. The rift started there, and he remembers it clearly. For a very specific reason, that rift was a true tragedy. It caused countless civilian casualties, but now that he's here, it won't happen. And thankfully, he came back. He grew up in an orphanage since birth, so he doesn't remember his parents' faces. But because he grew up in a place like that, he never felt sad or depressed. Still, he knows how painful it is to lose someone, so they should never be forgotten. A voice asks if he's okay. Sang thinks the goal is more important than getting stronger. Several monsters keep coming out of the portal with their armor, shields, and weapons. Packs of dogs and wolves, kobolds. The warriors are intimidated due to this effect, and the monsters glare with murderous intent. Hyun says it's working well and thinks it's still not showing the same level of results it had against Cerberus, probably because the moon is completely covered. So they're not fully submitting to him and says that makes everything better. The protagonist faces the monsters and advances, saying this is a good opportunity to test his new skills. The system displays the full charge and data about it. He moves his sword to strike, but the wolf dodges and grins. Until it notices a more intense attack approaching and hitting it, it's a recoil explosion. Several wolves are thrown far away. Shin keeps attacking and says the recoil affects a pretty wide area, and at full charge, it's quite damaging too. The monsters spit plasma, and Sang thinks that's enough for his area attack. Besides, his luck also increases his critical hit range. The system shows the current critical range as 120%, 600%. Hyun says the monster didn't die in one hit, so it probably wasn't a lethal crit. This time, he's going to deal as much damage as possible. He attacks again. A car moves until it stops, and people back away upon seeing a strong light. A guy gets out and says they're from the Player Association, and asks where the player is. This is Lee, level 110. A woman says yes, she made the call, there are monsters around. Lee says it's fine and tells her to go somewhere safe. The guy next to him watches and says they should probably check this out first. This is Young, level 90. They watch surprised as the protagonist keeps fighting the beast. Lee says it's an attacking kobold and asks if this is a kobold rift and tells them to take that one down first. A voice says it's fine and to stay back, it's Shin. And while fighting, he says he'll take it down himself. Jung says to wait. The system notifies that the title has been activated. Isolated, attacker, kobold. No allies within 5 meters of the target except him. All skills increased by 20%. Sang, smiling, says he wants to test it. The monster charges to attack. Hyun charges as well and thinks that the recoil explosion with all his skills stacked, they'll see what happens to him afterward too. The protagonist swings his sword and hurls his opponent far away, unleashing an intense and powerful energy. The wolf hits the ground, and the two from the association watching are shocked and ask if he's Shin. Sang answers yes and asks if they're from the association. Lee replies no. Thanks to him, there were no casualties. That, in a rift, is a miracle. And he thanks him again. Hyun laughs and says it's all right. A voice says that's just his guess and asks if he's going in. The protagonist is surprised. And Lee says he heard that's what most high-level players do, and asks to go with him if it's not too much. Jung gets nervous. Lee says they won't interfere. They just want to see how he hunts. Hyun smiles, walks away, and says to do as they please, and thinks these rookies, they're adorable. In the Bupyeong Station Rift, halfway through, they run while defeating monsters. The protagonist defeats them easily. Jung, panting, asks why he's so fast. Lee tells him to stop focusing on that and keep running, and asks if he didn't notice during the battle outside. He must have been blessed with incredible combat instincts or something, and says they'll keep watching from afar and learning from him. Jung says there's still something off with how much HP he has left after that fight. Lee thinks that even so, in his life as a player, he always had confidence in his survivability. But in that last fight, that fight was tough. 30 minutes ago, inside the entrance of the Bupyeong Station Rift, the two from the association looked frightened as they encountered many monsters. The wolves were using bows. The protagonist placed a dead monster in front and told everyone to stay behind him, thinking he already knew this would happen, so he brought a corpse along. The kobolds fired arrows, but only the defeated monster was hit. Jung ended up getting grazed. Shin wondered if bringing those two was a mistake and thought he couldn't do anything while protecting them. He paused for a moment and he told himself to stop acting weak. He needed to overcome situations like this and questioned if that wasn't the only way to become a ranker. As the wolf was about to shoot, it was struck first and plasma splashed. Its allies got distracted and looked at it. Then, Sang took the opportunity and charged in, saying he should have kept an eye on himself. Hyun used a powerful attack, managing to destroy all nearby enemies with a single blow. He crouched, looked back, and said they had made it to the second floor. Then, the boss monster approached to strike, but the protagonist reacted quickly, blocking with his sword and bracing against the ground, thinking it was a good thing he reacted in time. Had he let his guard down, he would have been minced meat. It was a kobold champion. Shin wondered who would have guessed a boss this strong would be waiting on the second floor. The boss stared at him with dark eyes. Sang widened his eyes when he saw it charging again and wondered if he could stop the attack with just the explosive knockback. Hyun thought he couldn't risk his body on a gamble like that. In this case, he had to reduce the damage while preventing the strike. He attacked with his sword, managing to break the shield and hit the kobold boss. Even the protagonist was surprised by the attack. The two from the association wondered how he also defeated the champion, known for its high defense, so easily. They thought he didn't even have the necessary stats for something like that, and wondered if maybe it was the brute force of the greatsword or fighting spirit. The boss's head hit the ground and two kobolds behind watched, confused. Shin laughed and said he understood, so that's how it was. He then easily defeated the other two kobolds. The association members watched, bewildered. Later, still in the same place, all kobolds had been eliminated, sliced to pieces, and a glowing boot was left behind. It was the Swift Boots, a pair of boots imbued with the haste of an eliminator, blessed by an earth spirit, allowing the wearer to run 3 times faster on difficult terrain. Sang said it was the perfect time to find that and thought that since kobolds were more possessive than goblins, he'd heard they often carried rare artifacts. He put the boots on and noticed they fit perfectly, saying this would make the raid much easier. Additionally, Hyun looked down and saw that the two from the association had managed to defeat the monsters below as well, saying they were much better than he expected. In real time, the protagonist ran and thought this raid might be easier than expected. 5 silver, 4 gold, and 1 platinum. Also, defeating that kobold pack along the way had restored his health. The system displayed info about Smart Hunter, rank C, with the effect of restoring 1 GP every time he defeated a small or larger monster. Shin widened his eyes and thought that disgusting aura was finally there. Still within the Bupyeong Rift, now in the central chamber, the king's treasure. Sang looked shocked as he found so much gold he could hardly believe it, wondering what he was seeing and apologizing for having a bad feeling earlier, questioning if that was really all of it and if he should just take everything and retire. Hyun was excited by the amount of gold he saw until a monster approached with a bow and shot at him. But the protagonist was faster, dodging the attack and rushing forward, asking if that was a sneak attack. The monster bared its teeth, and Shin said it was the same pattern and he was getting tired of it. He attacked. The monster dodged. Sang was surprised and wondered if it actually dodged from that distance, thinking it felt like the kobolds had lured him in on purpose. This was the final boss, the Kobold King Emperor. The protagonist stares at it in fear and dodges the massive attack, thinking that was dangerous and that if he hadn't dodged at full charge, his body would have been pierced. Shin leaps across the ground staring at it while the monster grabs something without taking its eyes off him. Meanwhile, outside, the two from the department approach and enter the portal, apologizing for being late. They are startled when they see the monster ahead, and the monster releases an even more intense energy. Due to the Kobold King's gaze, the intimidation status effect is triggered. The department staffer looks terrified, wondering what kind of boss this is and why his body won't move. Sang leaps behind the monster with his sword and asks how it dares to look away from him. The system notifies Recovery Skill Level 1 activated. Thanks to recovery, the intimidation status effect is removed. The monster notices, but by the time it does, it has already been struck. More notifications appear. Due to resistance to the Kobold King's skill, Demon Bash did not activate. Hyun thinks that recovery created a momentary opening, but it's a shame the stun didn't trigger due to the stat difference. Still, compared to the previous intimidation effect, if 2 level 100 ranged players reacted that way, it seems far more powerful than the Goblin Lord he fought before. Unfortunately, he failed last time, but this time he will surely succeed. Intimidation. The monster closes its eyes to unleash its power. The protagonist looks frightened, and the Kobold King launches an indiscriminate barrage, creating tremendous pressure. Shin blocks with his sword, deflecting the attack. Sang glares while trapped, thinking that, as expected, the enemy is smart, aware of his full charge, creating distance and trying to drag this into a battle of attrition. As far as he remembers, this guy's intimidation has a shorter cooldown than his recovery. If he realizes that, he could end up dying, unable to do anything due to intimidation. This must not turn into a long fight, and if only there were a way to attack from a distance. Hyun looks to the side and gets an idea. The bespectacled staffer asks if his partner is okay. Hyun replies that he is, though he has never experienced such a strong status effect before. So he froze up, and the attacks are incredibly powerful. The bespectacled staffer observes and asks why Shin is perfectly fine. Does he have some kind of debuff removal skill or something? Hyung says that for someone like him it wouldn't be surprising to have 1 or 2 such skills, then wonders what this is and feels a foreboding omen. Suddenly they widen their eyes as arrows draw closer and closer. Hyung thinks he should have noticed earlier and then yells that it's a trap. The protagonist asks if they're done recording now, and Shin leaps onto the gold. The gold begins to rise. The monster smiles, and it uses its power to attack, causing a massive impact and overwhelming pressure. A spear pierces Sang's body, the king jumps close to him smiling, and a voice calls him a fool. Hyun, still intact, asks if he thought he was the only one with a trick up his sleeve. The system notifies, due to the sacrifice effect, the received attack is nullified and health is restored. The protagonist slams his sword on the ground and says, the monster should have realized when he himself had been willingly accepting its blows. Shin uses his psychedelic skill. The user's body is further strengthened, and their speed is greatly increased. Sang charges forward, saying it's his turn to strike, activates his recovery skill, and attacks with incredible power. The monster screams in pain. The department staffers look astonished, and the bespectacled one asks if the gold coins are being incorporated like shotgun pellets, and how powerful that recoil is. Hyung says that's not what matters and thinks that he has seen countless players until now, but has never seen one with such a high level of combat sense. The Kobold King is gravely wounded, and Hyun asks if he's quite the tenacious guy. The protagonist grins sinisterly and says he'll see this through to the end. The monster opens its huge mouth and tries to advance, but its weapon is shattered by Shin, who counterattacks and cuts it in half. The system congratulates him for defeating the Kobold King. The monster begins to vanish and more notifications arrive. His level has increased significantly, and he has obtained the title of rank C, before the drink cools. A man with a magnificent beard boasts, saying that in his days of glory he would tear off his enemy's head and return before his drink cooled. Sang asks if this is the first time he's received a title from a constellation he has seen before, and thinks that finally it felt like intimidation. The system also notifies him of new items: an Amulet of Despair, Platinum Artifact, Boots of Evasion, Gold Artifact, and the Search Necklace, Gold Artifact. Hyun thinks the other items also look mouthwatering, deciding to take them now and devour them later, until someone calls out to him and the protagonist asks what's wrong all of a sudden. They answer that he must leave quickly, because the rift has started to close. Shin thinks he imagined it was something serious, but it's common sense that a rift closes once it has been cleared. until Sang widens his eyes, wondering what that means about all this loot, and shouts no as the staff pull him outside. Meanwhile, outside Bupyeong Rift Station, the three emerge, and the people watching from outside remark that it looks like they finally resolved it and the rift is closing, until they notice something strange and ask what's wrong with the atmosphere. Hyun comes out of the rift as if leaving a funeral, utterly dejected. A reporter approaches him, saying they're from the Player magazine, and as the hero who saved Bupyeong Station from a crisis, asks if he could say a few words. The protagonist asks, "Hero?" In Playertown Building's Underground 1 Seat Class training room, a mage is training. She notices the summoning of 3 rank B golems has been completed. This is Jo Yi-hyun. The golems charge toward Terry, but she quickly strikes them with rapid movements. The golem seems confused as it watches her fight, and the warrior positions her weapon, then advances, cutting all 3 down in a single strike, destroying them. Jo looks surprised, and Terry thinks that, as expected, this is the limit of a training room simulation. She came here so as not to forget the feeling she experienced today, but wants to fight that person again. She should have gotten the boy's contact information. Meanwhile, on the news, the journalist announces breaking news. A rift opened at Bupyeong Station today, and miraculously, a single player nearby passed through the rift alone. They begin interviewing that player. The warrior widens her eyes upon seeing it's the boy she fought before. The reporter asks what he thinks about clearing the rift alone with 0 casualties. The protagonist answers that he simply did what needed to be done. The reporter says he's even humble, and that's truly amazing. Terry admits she didn't expect to see him again like this. Park asks about the opponent, saying that according to the Player Association, the monster's estimated level was around 150, and wonders if that isn't still quite low by comparison, since they should be difficult to face. Shin agrees, saying that level is a very important factor, but he doesn't believe it's the absolute thing that decides victory or defeat. The warrior keeps watching the news, thinking that he's right. For him to say something like that with such confidence must mean he's able to objectively assess his own abilities. She felt this since last time, but now she can sense an inexplicable maturity from him and wonders who his master could be. There's a chance the constellation is a god of war, or perhaps he has a contract with a divine constellation, just like herself. The next day, in Shin's house, he releases his power and opens his eyes, excited that he can finally eat. To summarize the artifacts Sang received yesterday: intimidation, detection, and recoil, all useful skills. He wonders if this is thanks to his luck stat and thinks that if he continues like this, he'll be able to grow in whatever direction he wants. After the era of players began, most swordsmen had that same image. Swordsmen couldn't escape the mold of strength and endurance. But as monsters with varied patterns began appearing, swordsmen who only pursued strength started walking the path of ruin. Thus, swordsmen slowly began to lose their place, or so it was thought, until the appearance of the sword demon of Gyeong changed the paradigm for all swordsmen. He shed his armor to maximize agility, compensating for lack of defense with evasion and high utility skills rather than destructive power. In other words, a swordsman who could handle any situation, seen as the creator of the all-weather sword style. Although in his previous life the protagonist hadn't changed his style out of pride, this life is different. The system notifies Amulet of Awakening, Boots of Evasion, Necklace of Search, preparations for absorption complete, creamy kobold forest mushroom soup, powerful kobold black pepper steak. Shin gets excited, asking if this is the kobold king's diet. He thought the king was just a scary bastard, but he was actually a gourmet and wonders why there are only 2 dishes. Sang looks at the 2 plates, but more notifications arrive. Fresh kobold swamp orange larva salad. Hyun says to take back what he said about him being a gourmet. In front of his house, there are several people. An old man with a camera says he's been allowed to do this before, while the security guard asks how many times he has to say this is wrong. The old man asks what they're supposed to eat to survive and if that's really his problem. Hyun watches from the window and wonders what they're doing there and how they even got there last time. He had been feeling unwell, so he went out for some fresh air, but seeing this made him feel even sicker. He decides to go back inside and rest in peace. The protagonist says that, in any case, he has no plans from here on out, so he doesn't know what to do and wonders if he should just rest today. Then his phone rings. Shin answers, and a girl on the line introduces herself as Ji Hai from the player management department. She says she saw him last time in the mission area and asks if he remembers her. Sang replies that he does and asks what the occasion is. Ji says it's nothing major, but they'd like to present him with a plaque for clearing the rift. Hyun thinks about the plaque and recalls the same feeling from last time, being called a hero or being given a plaque. Seriously? By his standards, it's such a trivial achievement that it makes his face burn. It's only natural because, compared to the players who will soon be stopping all the coming crises, the The rift he cleared is just a drop in the bucket, and he's still far too lacking to accept such praise. He apologizes and says he'll have to decline. Haya asks if he could at least accept the priority pass for the dungeon he requested last time. She says she's talking about the silent solo dungeon. The protagonist's eyes widen as he asks if it's been approved. Ji confirms and says that thanks to his achievement, the higher-ups gave approval without any problem. Silent Land, a dungeon where most named monsters use the status effect skill, Silence. Before, Shin was surprised and asked if it was a picture of his sister again. The warrior replies that he has the habit of looking at this picture whenever he finishes a job, and come to think of it, it's already been 10 years since he lost his sister. Sang asks the name of the dungeon his sister was clearing when she died. The blonde replies that it was Silent Land because his sister was a player who relied heavily on skills, and they said she was helpless in that crisis. He also says that the current him could have solved it without trouble, and that there's no reason to regret it now, unless he could return to the past. In the present, Yun, still on the phone, tells them to prepare it immediately, thinking that it's a dungeon where there's something he must do. On another day, a car is moving, driven by the protagonist, who says that as expected from a new car, the ride feels different. He had wanted to spend money only on artifacts if possible, but painfully realized last week during the Bupyeong Rift incident that he would never take public transport again. Then his phone rings again. It's the Player Association. Shin answers and Ji says she's calling to confirm that today is the day for clearing Silent Land. Sang says he's on his way and almost there. Hia says she understands and that another staff member will guide him on site. Sang thinks about how time flies and that he was so focused on training and checking his accumulated results that already a full week has passed since he went to the rift. He says he wants to test his new skills soon. Then Hyun notices something. The traffic is stopped. He wonders what's happening and if there's a reason for a traffic jam at this time, since he had deliberately come after rush hour. The protagonist, annoyed, says it will take time for traffic to clear and wonders if a rift opened or something. Then Shin widens his eyes as he sees someone ahead who seems famous and asks if it's Jeong-soo. There's a level 21 dungeon there. Some fangirls of Jeong call out to him saying they love him and to just look at them once. A reporter says he's as popular as ever and asks how it feels to be loved by so many fans. Soo replies that it's an honor. Someone wonders what's with that bland response, questioning if he's being too careless with his answers just because he's famous. The reporter asks what he thinks about this dungeon clearing. Any attack plans? Jeong says it's always the same thing, just cutting down monsters. The reporter is also his superfan and her weakness is part of her charm. The cameraman tells her to control herself. Sang, watching from his car, realizes he got distracted while observing and made a mistake. Someone calls out. It's a reporter saying this is a scoop, the meeting of a god and a mortal, that he's challenging the throne of the sword demon. The security guard says this is the player who cleared the rift alone recently, and that he heard he's a swordsman with a similar style to Soo's. Soo says he knows. The reporter asks what brings him there. Hyun steps out of the car and replies that it's just a coincidence. The reporter asks if he's obviously there to explore with the master, why he switched cars, whether it's fully charged, and how much it cost. The protagonist answers again that it's a coincidence, that no, it's fully charged, all while thinking that he didn't want to draw Soo's attention and wondering how to handle this situation. Gyeong watches him and smiles. Shin widens his eyes, wondering if he really just smiled, if he really was smiling at him. A voice asks if he took out a loan or paid in full. Sang, distracted, thinks he doesn't know the meaning behind that smile, but even if it's just a coincidence, he's happy to have seen him like this. And when he looks at him, he can tell he still has a long way to go. Soo tells them to begin as well, and his partner beside him says he understands. Gyeong thinks he's met countless promising players until now, but this one is different. He isn't looking at him with eyes of admiration, but as someone he must surpass. He feels that they will meet again someday. Elsewhere in the level 66 dungeon, Silent Land, the protagonist gets out of his car and thinks that, as expected of Soo, his stance was flawless. He didn't show a single opening even while standing still. The higher the goal, the more fun it is to chase it down. He'll pursue him at terrifying speed, until a voice suddenly asks what the hell he's talking about. Today was definitely the day they were supposed to clear Silent Land. What does he mean by suddenly? It's the turn of a player calling out Shin. Sang approaches, asking if something is wrong. The girl says he arrived just in time and asks if, just because he's a promising player now, he doesn't think he's going too far. She says he has to observe basic etiquette even among players. Hyun thanks God it really was today. He had been worried because his memory was foggy. Today is the day that Guy's younger sister lost her life in Silent Land. Still, he never imagined she'd have such a fiery personality. He wonders if her personality is the complete opposite of his. He thinks there's no need to save face in a situation like this. The redhead calls out to him. The protagonist thinks that sometimes you need to be firm and tells her that no matter how unfair she thinks it is, she can't take it out on him. He only came at the time set by the association and asks if there's a problem, saying he's going into the dungeon right now. The redhead tells him to stop right there and asks if he thinks she'll just let this slide peacefully, warning him to watch himself. Shin walks away thinking maybe he really should have rested today. This is so annoying. At the entrance to Silent Land, Sang enters and covers his nose, saying the stench of rot hits him the moment he steps inside. He wonders if that's to be expected, thinking that most of the monsters here are, until the ground cracks and hands burst out, grabbing his legs. The monster drags him down, and the system notifies him that he has been affected by the silent status effect from the carnival's attack. He cannot use any skills for 0.5 seconds. Silence is triggered with just a single touch. Hyun draws his weapon and cuts it in half. More monsters crawl out from underground. The protagonist thinks that to sum it up, he must not get hit even once and must minimize skill use, which means this is nothing but a battle of fundamentals. At the Korean Player Association, Scouts Team 4 Strategy Meeting Room, a staff member says the next player to discuss is Shin. The director asks if it's this guy, the one who surprised Sue today. A voice says they heard it's only been a month since he awakened from being a porter. The scarred one asks if this isn't the guy the Lee brothers, Lee Young and Lee Hyung, couldn't stop praising. This is An, leader of Scouts Team 4 of the Korean Player Association. The staffer next to him confirms it's correct, saying he's a player who recently gained fame. An says he's definitely a player with a rapid growth rate, but it's a very special case. There are many similar cases like his. The vice leader says he judges it the same way. Players with rapid growth always appear. A solo rift clear should naturally be highly evaluated, but they can't fully grasp the level of risk, so he thinks they should judge cautiously. There's a possibility it's just a case of him knowing how to use the media well. He doesn't think that's the case though. Even so, up until today, this is the 100th time he's been refuted by Lee. Another staff member also says that on top of that, she interrupted him today after he barely said a few words. Another new record. The leader asks if the woman who stood up has something to say. Lee replies that yes, she apologizes for interrupting so rudely, but it's because this is a player she's been continuously monitoring. She has some data she's analyzed on him over the past few days, and first would like everyone to look at it together. Only then will they realize that this player is no ordinary player. As everyone knows, this is the growth chart of an average player. The level is fixed at 50 because the estimated level is around that, and this is his estimated growth chart. The staff look at it, asking what this is, saying it's absurd. The vice leader asks what she thinks she's doing, if she's not putting too much personal feeling into this just because he's a player she's following, and tells her not to forget her duty as a scout. They ask if she doesn't realize by looking at the number of titles, since that number corresponds to the growth rate of Gyeong's sword demon. He says all this information is based on objective judgment and for good reason. She met all of Shin's dungeon companions and remembers when she asked one of them before what was unusual about Hyun. Dek said there were so many unusual things he didn't even know where to start. Lee said she'd appreciate if he could talk about his skills or combat sense. Young answered that his skills were no joke, that it was the first time he'd seen someone use stun that way, but if that were all, he'd just be unusual, not special. He asked if the reason he's special is, should she say, it's his innate combat sense. Park and Kang replied that those would be the fundamentals, that he was truly different. He asked if that meant he was superior compared to other players of the same level. Ju replied that it wasn't just at that level. If it were, they wouldn't be speaking about him like this. Taesok said it was hard to explain. Should he say it's a fundamental ability beyond just being a swordsman? He said he felt like a veteran player who had gone through ups and downs. Lee asked how, and if he could explain a bit more in detail. If his movements were as if he already knew everything. They answered that his movements, preventing things with animal-like instincts, were works of art. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, the protagonist is tearing through monsters with his massive sword. The monsters try to surround him while the boy continues answering the scouts' questions, that ordinary players usually hesitate in a critical moment. Lee agrees, saying that unless one has accumulated a lot of experience, they'll at least falter. The boy says he wasn't like that. It seemed like he acted immediately, even before thinking. Meanwhile, in the fight, Shin slices his enemies into pieces until a monster lunges at him with its massive mouth, but Sang manages to dodge. He asks if that means they should understand that his senses are extremely sharp. The boy answers yes, his senses are razor sharp, no matter what situation he faced. In the fight, the monster charges, and Hyun clashes with it. Meanwhile, in the office, Lee says that up to the point it seemed he was answering to that. To summarize what's been said so far, an instinct close to premonition. That's what makes him special. In addition, to add to that, his combat sense is at least A+ level. If you include the growth rate in the analysis, she believes he has everything to become an S-rank player. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, the protagonist lands his final strike and pants heavily, saying there's a repugnant number of monsters. The vice leader grits his teeth and says it'll be like this until the end, and asks if she knows what rank S means. Lee replies she knows exactly what she's saying. The vice leader asks if she's saying the player knew about the rift in advance and gained his titles that way, and if she might as well say he regressed or something. He asks about regression and says that would make sense, as expected of him. The leader tells everyone to be quiet, recognizing that this player is not ordinary, and from today, Lee will officially be responsible for tracking the player. It's still the early stage, so there won't be additional manpower. He, excited, responds that she'll do her best. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Shin walks with his hand on his nose, thinking he always hated the smell of monster plasma, but ghoul plasma seems especially vile. They're tough to deal with because they appear suddenly. Wait a minute, come to think of it, he has that skill he's had for a while and should have used earlier. Sang activates his detection skill and senses numerous monsters around, realizing there are still many left and planning to wipe them all out, until Hyun widens his eyes upon seeing something red flying as well. The protagonist approaches the flying creature, wondering if it's a fly and if that counts as a monster, until an explosion goes off the moment he brushes his finger against it. Shin says it was a self-destructing fly and thinks that luckily he reacted immediately and only got burned. If he had been distracted, his whole hand would have been blown apart. In any case, the fact that a self-destructing fly exists means it's proof that there's a mage-type monster nearby. If he doesn't create some distance quickly, more explosions erupt, along with skeletons controlling the flies through a magic circle. Elsewhere, the vice leader calls out to Lee, saying he now understands she has a high opinion of the player, but she hasn't mentioned anything about his skills or titles beyond combat sense. Based on the guess, it seems like he has a way to obtain those things on his own, and he asks if her judgment was wrong. He replies that no, she's thought of that as well, but it's just a fantasy. But what if, by some miracle, that assumption is reality? Meanwhile, in the fight, the protagonist is still unscathed because he managed to block all the explosions with the shield around his body. He asks if this is for real, if this is their hobby now, and says it's his turn to attack. A few days ago, Playertown, Building C, Underground Training Room, the protagonist is training his sword attacks. It has already been about 3 days since he began this. Except in special situations like when consuming an artifact or in other unique cases, the method to obtain a skill is very simple. It's simply repetitive work. If one uses the methods known to the public, basic passive skills are relatively simple to acquire. However, to obtain a special active skill with a full charge, a method like the one Shin just used will not work. This is because it requires repetitive work that meets very specific conditions. And since the players who discover this do not share the information to keep their advantage, in reality, the level of difficulty is such that it is practically impossible to acquire without some form of genre correspondence. However, as it happens, Sang is a very experienced player. He activates his defensive sword skill while in front of him skeletons are laughing and releasing wasps toward them. A whole swarm of wasps. The defensive sword that Hyun worked so hard to obtain is without a doubt a good defensive skill, but its greatest disadvantage is that it doesn't bind obligations to him. Then, the protagonist attacks and explosions erupt, smoke dissipates, Shin leaps and says there will always be an alternative solution, and the system notifies that a group of undead mages is performing multicasting of the Inferno skill. They unleash their magic, Sang watches, smiles, and says it's too late. Hyun swiftly moves his sword, cutting the mages to pieces. Meanwhile, still inside the dungeon, someone lingers in a corner, a skeleton in armor. The mages on the ground are burning, and the protagonist notices, interested in the crystal, asking if it's a purple magic crystal, a high-quality magic crystal sold for over 100 million on average. The higher the dungeon level entered, the better the rewards. Shin takes the crystal and says for now he'll grab it. After finishing the dungeon, then wonders if he should quickly head deeper inside. The system notifies that he is using the detection skill, monsters detected by detection. Sang wonders about just one, and where all the monsters from before have gone, until the armored skeleton is behind him in an attacking stance. Hyun senses something at his back and thinks it's too late to resist, wondering if it's right, left, or below, because whatever it is, he must guess the direction of the attack by instinct. The protagonist leaps, hoping his choice was right. The enemy tears open the ground, creating a massive hole. Shin looks down and thinks he now understands. Of course, the monsters didn't just disappear. They all fled because of this one's appearance, a monster that ruthlessly annihilates all without distinguishing between friend and foe, and this is the night of the end. The enemy leaps at him to strike, and Sang wonders why the one who should be in the deepest part of the dungeon is here, but facing it directly, he thinks he understands. It really is him. the one who killed his comrade's younger sister. The system notifies that this is the mid-boss, Knight of the End of Penitence and Wrath. Hyun thinks he won't let that happen in this lifetime. Blows clash, blades press against each other, and the protagonist, straining with his strength, thinks each strike of this guy is so heavy. He is an undead-type monster, as his name suggests, a knight born of finalization. More precisely, he is a monster in which the soul of a slain swordsman has been resurrected into an immortal body. His main skill is constantly active, Swamp of Silence, a skill that applies the silence debuff if touched by the black aura generated at his feet. The association judged he could be easily defeated if accompanied by a ranged player. Using the dungeon monster Ghoul as a standard, they set Silent Ground's difficulty at level 120, and that was their greatest mistake. The true power of the Knight of Finalization is not something like the Swamp of Silence. It's the soul of the slain swordsman, which means that if the soul belongs to a high-level swordsman, the knight's threat level increases exponentially. The association, realizing this too late, would later moderately revise the threat level of Silent Ground. According to the factors revealed later, the threat level of the Silent Ground entity, Knight of the End, is, until the enemy throws him far, the protagonist slammed to the ground, his back aching, spitting plasma, thinking this is dangerous, and wondering if this time he might truly lose his life. Shin remains on the ground and says this is really important. The Knight of the End does not understand. Sang uses his sword to push himself up, saying every time he's about to lose his life or things get hard, he realizes people don't change that easily. Whenever in danger, only weak thoughts come to mind first. At this pace, nothing has changed. Hyun calls him a failure, asks what he's staring at, and tells him to come at him already. The enemy stands still, glaring at him. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.